13th XBRL workshop for supervisors. And introductory words, yeah. And the introductory words are going to be made by Mark Camelin, the chairman of XBRL Europe. Thank you, Mark.
I try to manage to give you some words. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to open up in hands the first this 13th workshop on XBRL we organized. I'm speaking in the name of XBRL Europe and also as Secretary General of XBRL Luxembourg. And I may say we are happy to see that we are such a numerous folk of people coming together to promote and to implement XBRL solutions. I will not bore you with XBRL technical stuff because you are more experts than myself, but allow me to give you some information about what's happening perhaps here in Luxembourg. Of course, you are not going to learn very new things because you know already that we are an active national jurisdiction, and especially it's the CSSF, which is the host of today, which is the first mover in this domain in Luxembourg by having implemented the corrupt FINRAP taxonomies and reporting back in 2008. So you see, XBRL is not only theory, it's practical work in Luxembourg. Currently, we have 22 members in Luxembourg, which is quite important number compared to the size of our economy. I will not enumerate all these companies, but we have a very open-minded organization, meaning that we have on the one side regulators such as CSSF, but also central bank, the insurance commission or supervisory commission, and we had on the other side associations representing banks, representing fund industry, representing insurance companies. We have auditors on board, we have accountants on board, but we have also technology providers such as the big four companies or technology providers coming from the IT world, be it as consultant or suppliers. The projects I already mentioned, the corrupt FINRAP, which is no longer a project, it's an ongoing reporting system and solution. It will have the evolution you are going to give it in the next years. On the other side, we started some other projects back in the fund industry, but for today, unfortunately, I must say, as Secretary General, with no, how to say, touchable results. On the other side, there is a major project which will start now in 2010, end of 2010, 2011, is the annual collection of annual accounts done by the StatEC, which is the statistical office in Luxembourg. And these data are not collected for only statistical purposes, but for the central office for balance sheets, which has to be inspected, and for the company register. So there's a project which is quite important and will help Luxembourg to join the other XBRL users in Europe. Then we have started some projects in the new field, or more academic field. Maybe some of you heard about the WICI, the World Intellectual Capital Initiative, consisting in using XBRL data structures to evaluate not only the financial health of a company, but its potential when it comes to see what are the know-how, what are the patents a company has, and to give value on it. So that brings me to another point. All these projects are not done in a purely Luxembourg context, but mostly in a European context, and that is why XBRL Luxembourg joined also the XBRL Europe initiative. I say initiative because XBRL Europe is not, as you know, perfectly know, it's not a jurisdiction in its own. It's more, how to say, a hat covering all, an umbrella covering the European national jurisdiction which exists throughout Europe. And the idea is to and the development of XBRL in different reportings, but the idea is to have one voice in front of the European authorities and one voice in front of potential users or associations which should use XBRL. And so certainly your work is one of the importance in this domain, because when we look to different national projects in the same domain, in the same field, like FINREP, of course, some of the users ask, why should we have the same technology but different, how to say, versions or national colors, and why not harmonize it in a better way in the future? So it's certainly not nothing which can be done tomorrow, but certainly after tomorrow. So that's why, of course, we as Luxembourg support the idea of being in Europe, in European projects. You know that within XBRL Europe we have several working groups which are working on the same subject. I see some of the chairpersons sitting in this room. So there is room for cooperation and aiming at the same goal, meaning having efficient reportings based on XBRL. I will not drill down other ideas, but I will encourage you to participate, to join events which will be organized in the next future. On the one side by XBRL Europe, there will be in the beginning of March a face-to-face meeting in Rome. The date should be normally the 2nd of March and will be confirmed. And it's organized by our Italian friends. And the day before the XBRL Europe Day, we have a special event around company registers. And the day afterwards, we have our traditional XBRL Europe Day, meaning we are going through the different projects, so also through the FINREP harmonization project. Then in May, there is something which should also be of great interest to you all, is that we have the 22nd International XBRL Conference, this time in Europe, and it's on the 17th, between the 17th and 19th of May in Brussels this time, hosted by XBRL Europe, and we are trying to give to show the world the European contribution to the XBRL initiative. So the theme of this conference will be sharing economic information in the global world. Of course, XBRL is not a matter of only Europe. I may only encourage you to join this meeting, as it will be displayed on flyers to attend it, to participate. But I do not need, unfortunately, or fortunately for me, not to encourage you to implement, because you already implement XBRL. So that's certainly of great interest for us. And at the end of the year, in September, there will be the second XBRL Europe Day in 2011, combined with the annual members meeting. So I will stop now. I guess I could make some minutes good. And I wish you a very fruitful meeting and with tangible results, and that you may go a step forward. Enjoy your stay here in Luxembourg, and if you have some questions or if you have some suggestions to forward to XBRL Europe, don't hesitate. You will find certainly a way to give me this input. I thank you and have a good meeting.
Table forward, sorry. How is the sound now? interesting sound. How is the sound? Acceptable? Good afternoon. This presentation is about the XBRL specifications and standards activity on the part of the XBRL Standards Board and a number of the working groups. Is it coming through? Is it coming through okay? Okay. I will begin with an overview of a number of technical areas that are active in XBRL. The first, we will review the Strategic Initiatives project that the XSB, the XBRL Standards Board, has just begun. The first of 6 initiatives is starting now with volunteer participants, and the idea is to bring XBRL into the requirements that we now see with active use and open participation, and try to address some of the enhancements that people have been asking for. Then I've listed in this chart a couple of other activities going on. Activities in the rendering area. Inline XBRL has a very active following. It's begun to be used in filings in Britain, and provides a very powerful way to embed XBRL instance documents into browsable HTML. Very wide interest. We have a number of working groups that are bringing additional specifications and modules to XBRL in the area of rendering. Rendering will be a link base to provide formatting specific to a taxonomy to define how data of an instance document is displayed to a user. It's sort of the opposite. Inline XBRL is a way to embed an instance document into a browsable document, so the person who publishes the inline XBRL is publishing the data in the right format, in the right bitmaps and font and coloring and so forth, and it happens to include inside of it XBRL data. The rendering link base will go the other direction. It will allow XBRL, stuff that is natively in XBRL, to produce as output something that can be rendered in a browsable PDF file and other formats. The formula group has been very active, particularly in Europe, and we have some new modules coming out. Versioning has been pretty active in Europe, and it has some new modules out. And then there's always new areas like semantics and use of databases. But I wanted to conclude this chart with one comment from presenting at the 21st workshop in China, which seems like it was just last week, but it was a month ago. It was very exciting to see so many new faces with so much enthusiasm and participation come into XBRL. The conference actually in China, the Chinese people have not only adopted XBRL as a standard for their own work, but there's all these bright participants who are now joining the working groups. And when you look at the working group attendance list, it reflects these people actually joining in now, which is great. The Strategic Initiatives is a project by the Standards Board, and it's beginning with an defining goals and so forth that culminated in a survey. The survey went out to the community. Responses came in from many people in many countries, and we tried to match the goals up with what people felt that we needed to do to bring XBRL forward through this list of meetings and summaries and so forth that you see here. And we're now at the point of getting our act together and beginning. And the 6 initiatives are mapped against the three goals. Let's try to move this over. We have three main goals that seem to be the most interesting and important to the survey respondents. Making XBRL easier for developers, improving XBRL comparability. You have XBRL documents from different places, different financial reports, different taxonomies, and we need to make XBRL data easier to consume. Those are our three main goals. And the six task items are to create an abstract model, a framework for understanding XBRL, and a framework for organizing the training material. It follows down the list. To produce training material, we have to have an idea what the abstract model is. To produce a standard API, which was of quite high priority to the respondents, we need to have a model against which this API is being built. And the idea is to make the abstract model and the API somewhat independent of the historical issue that XBRL depended on XML, because in the future we expect other forms of serialization, heavy use of SQL databases, and hopefully we will outlive XML as a media. Fourth task is to reorganize the specification to make it easier to understand, to enhance data comparability, different instance documents, different DTSs, and to develop application profiles. So let me move on to the abstract modeling task, which is beginning now. We're sort of comparing what we're doing in XBRL with abstract modeling to what some people see as a sister organization, what the OMG is doing with sort of a sister standard, maybe if you consider it that, UML. So XBRL currently is a framework for modeling various domains. It's a meta-model, not a model. A taxonomy models a domain, it models a financial report. And correspondingly, UML is a framework for modeling software infrastructures. So we've kind of made this allegory that the XBRL International's XII's relationship to XBRL is kind of like OMG's relationship is to UML. And the OMG has something called a meta-object facility, which is something that we feel we need for XBRL. So here is a class diagram of the meta-object facility. It has these sort of academic, abstract things that you would expect in a computer science class. There's a class on top, generalization, user model, and instances. And we make a parallel of that in what we might expect the abstract modeling committee to come out with, not trying to constrain it. But we also have something like a class, and in XBRL we have facts and items and labels and so forth. And in a taxonomy we have concepts with their labels like cash on hand with a string label in multiple languages and multiple roles. And then in instances we have actual data for it. So these things need parallels. The initial goal of abstract modeling is to capture the meaning of XBRL, the semantics that are in the normal XBRL, what we call the core spec, the 2.1 XBRL spec and its dimensions. And we want to be independent of syntactical details, not glued to XML, which has been kind of it's been a wonderful feature of XBRL. It might also be a wonderful problem if you look at the size of instance documents and the need to put things into large databases for big production usages. And we want the primary model to be compatible across different technologies. SQL, of course, is very important. We talk about the Common Warehouse Meta Model as OMG's equivalent building block that we might start with. So it's secondary to bind this to XML and to make that bridge. What we don't want to do is get into domain modeling, model a particular usage of a taxonomy. That could be a parallel effort in the best practices board. We're not yet going to get into formulas and versioning and rendering. These are additional modules to the course spec, but there might be time for it later. And the plan is to have a very intensive, rapid process. It shouldn't take forever. They're just describing an abstract model. So they believe they can get done in 6 to 8 weeks. That's a hope. This way it's easier to get commitments of people, and the deliverable value is that the abstract model can come in front of these tasks that would consume it, such as the API and redocumenting and so forth. It's a prerequisite to these follow-on tasks. The format of this task force will be 2 face-to-face meetings. The initial one will be in the beginning of January in Boston. They've tried to organize for where the participants are able to meet, and then have, of course, some web support. This for a person who volunteers frequently. They're looking for daily conference calls, or every other day, and constant work between the face-to-face meetings. So this is a real intensive, close the windows, shut the doors, and get the work done in a hurry, a task, a quick task. There will be a dedicated project manager to drive it, and the idea will be to stick to a very firm agenda. So the topics are: what kind of use cases is XBRL intended to work in? And this has already begun to be explored in the best practices group. To provide models for the key elements of the core specification, things listed here like facts and units and what you're used to dealing with. But in the different extension modules to XBRL, we've begun to treat these differently. We really need this cohesive model to bind together the core parts, and to bridge the gap from the abstract model to the current XML specifications. After the model, or as the model is being built, there will be an open and public review process to have as broad an outreach as possible. Some of you may have attended the outreach calls we've had recently on the inline XBRL. We've started with a versioning product that can take a instance document and apply a versioning report and upgrade the namespaces and the concept name changes from one version to another. That's had some outreach calls, and of course the Global Ledger Group has been using outreach webcast for quite a while. So the idea is to get some broad community support after this is done, and an intensive volunteer process in developing it. There's 6 areas in which people can volunteer and in which we need participation. Different kinds of skills are needed, not just the techies or the coders, but the managers and the abstract thinkers and the people who can write, and the people who can review what the people who write produce, and architects and practitioners, whatever sort of hat you wear. We need your mind and your brain hijacked for just a little bit at least for these 6 areas. So as the people who tend to raise their hand first for volunteering have drifted in, I took a look at where they're located, and I sort of feel we need to shake the trees a little bit here. Create an abstract model is going on now. There's only a few European participants. Europe is where the educational system teaches abstract modeling the best, I think, where the thinkers come from in the academic and the mathematical training. So we should be able to find more volunteers from here. We have volunteers for training materials from all sorts of places. Australia, apparently many people volunteered from the US and checked off everything. Defining the API signatures. on one side, the goal might be for people who are part of in-production systems to propose what they already have. And on the other side, people who want to build frameworks and consuming tools and able to say what they need to get together. And to base all of this off the abstract model and to base it on the idea of supporting both XML and SQL. I would think the developing API signatures should appeal greatly to people who like to have code under their fingernails. Most of you work for companies where there are people who can't help themselves once they get into contributing code and getting their ego wrapped up in their interfaces. So we should be able to come up with quite a bit more volunteers in that. Documenting, improving the documentation, reorganizing it, making it understandable. People from Poland and China, but where are the countries that are in this room? Let's encourage some people to join. There's a custom mailbox, volunteers at xbrl.org, very easy to remember. Or if you prefer a web page, there's a SurveyMonkey web page in which to fill out the sort of areas that you might be interested in participating in. You're only volunteering. You can always back off later. Or people on your staff, I don't mean individually. So a couple of updates on the specs. Some of this will sound pretty technical, but the base spec has been somewhat hard to motivate people to come to. In the 2002 to 2003 period, we had 20 or 30 people on each weekly call, sometimes yelling at each other and screaming and getting very, very excited, and now we have 2, 4, 6, small numbers. The sort of things we're dealing with, while they seem unimportant, they're kind of like details about dimensions. They do include some important topics, such as the calculation link base that people have been depending upon to determine whether a calculation link base says that the totals are matching the sum of the items of data. We discovered a big flaw. The calculation thought process in XBRL was based upon something we call precision. We have two ways of representing numbers. The scientific notation, 10 to the third, 10 to the sixth, how many significant digits. It reminds me of slide rules. If you're my age and you see young people, they've never heard of a slide rule, or they see one in the Paris Museum of Ancient Technology. But we've based XBRL on slide rule technology. The submissions and the standards and the people using XBRL have been reporting in something we call decimals, which is the way calculators and computers behave. And we're proposing to change the calculations to infer decimals, because if they don't, a total that has a 0 in it anywhere due to a trick of logarithms becomes invalid. And most people could care less to know about logarithms anymore. So we'd like to move on. Just some details. The red words show that the spec would be crossing out precision and putting decimals, and it has some importance if there is a running project that has been receiving filings with calculation link bases and using them and has some zeros in there. So here in Europe, formulas are considered very important for CoreRep and for FinRep. And as we've begun to use formulas, they are very detailed, very technical, and every time something technical gets into use, Windows 1.0, Java 1.0, you're used to knowing that initial usage discovers what we really need to do in features. And here is a list of extension modules that have finally reached the CR status. The CR status means that implementers can implement them, and in fact the primary vendor used in Europe has already implemented these features. The secondary vendors are about to release them. Once we have some implementations, we can make sure that they actually work right before the XBRL organization switches to a recommended status. But these sort of things that we get, the aspect cover filters, that sounds kind of technical. When we began with XBRL filings, we began very timidly and very gently in using dimensions. Now I think the current IFRS has 27 dimensions. Dimensions are becoming kind of popular. We've got lots of them. Dimensions have things like defaults. We have to be able to easily, without a lot of writing of syntax, say, oh, well, we want this thing to be only for the default because we don't care about the breakdown in these schedules. It just doesn't apply. And there's other reasons why we need that kind of a feature. We need an ability to look at the hierarchy in a link base and walk the trees in our formulas so that any formula that depends on the hierarchy of, it could be concepts, it could be dimensions, it could be anything, something arbitrary like a custom link base, so that hierarchy can be represented in a single formula, walk this tree, rather than, as some of our members here have encountered, rather than having to make hundreds or even thousands of formulas if you have thousands of leaves on the tree and they're really all the same. We've spent the morning talking about messaging and how to present human readable messages to users, and for that we have a generic messages spec. We feel that that's very important, and we use that to produce validation messages in a structure that can be generalized and work independently of tools and independently of languages, and also probably have different kinds of messages, like short ones that are terse and long ones that are verbose. Last but not least, I think, is that people have been interested in formulas that can deal with chaining, A equals B plus C, but B is computed from another formula. And we've been able to do that in a trickery manner by coding the B into the C formula, but now we actually can chain formulas together and use multiple instance documents. So we could take filings from multiple sources and multiple companies that maybe have different extension taxonomies, or we can take filings from different years that again have different taxonomies, extract data from them together and produce things like running averages and that sort of stuff without having to translate the data. So these are extension modules for formula. I'm an impatient person. Some of this has been going for 2 years, but we're finally seeing the implementation of this come about. We spent some time yesterday in the face-to-face technical meeting reviewing some of the member company formula issues, and they included some very difficult technical areas of dealing with sparse data, where the formulas need to operate where sometimes only part of the data is reported and the other part of the data may have to be assumed, or some of the data may be inapplicable, and you have on your Excel sheets the little gray cross-hatching, blocking out of cells. We need to be able to easily do that in formulas. We could always do it the hard way by cell at a time coding all of the details. But what we want is a way to have a sophisticated function that expresses this in a manner that makes the formulas easy to maintain and explain to other people. And we spent a moderate amount of time talking about rendering new ways of producing human viewable data based upon what's in the taxonomy to express its structure. One of the major efforts began about, I thought it was 2 years ago, and I got corrected yesterday. We started in 2006 in Munich doing versioning, and it was really, really important. I remember Ignacio saying, "You will be done by December." And everybody signed up and agreed that we would be done by December. And that was 2006. I can't even think how many years ago that was. Seems like yesterday. We now have in CR stage a couple of key modules. We have a base module. We've taken versioning and split it into kind of a hierarchical set of modules that each one adds upon the sophistication of the previous one. So the base module lets us know when the namespace changed, your IFRS of 2009 on one side and your IFRS of 2010 on the other side. It lets us know that roles have changed, and roles might be the schedules, the kind of balance sheets. Roles might be also used for other purposes, but that's what's in the base module for versioning. We then have two modules that deal with concepts, the things like liabilities, cash on hand, property, plant, and equipment. The simplest module shows name changes, because name changes used to occur because in the name we reflected what the legislators required us to call the data. Actually, here in Europe, I don't know if you want to think that we're gaining sophistication or we're going back to old times. In the old days, when you had COBOL, things were numbered. In the new days, to make the taxonomies independent of legislators changing names on concepts, we're going back to numbers. But in between, we've got taxonomies that embed things that change from year to year, such as their name, because some accounting approach for collecting some data has a slightly different nuance. And we have all of the things that go along with concepts, such as their types and their XBRL details, and most importantly, their labels and the references to the law or code that they represent. These modules are in CR status. We already have two tools that have been developed that can take two taxonomies, and three tools, sorry, that can take two taxonomies and attempt to produce the differences reports. In some cases it takes a human. In some cases they can be found by software code. But the next step will be to get into the more sophisticated areas of the relationship sets that are in link bases and dimensions, and what is called here instance aspects. The relationship sets don't only include presentation and calculation, but they include the dimensional relationship sets that get quite sophisticated. But dimensions only manifest themselves in an instance document. To know whether a particular item being reported in an instance actually has a visible dimension requires knowing these details, like whether a dimension is a default, because if the default is a total, it probably doesn't show up in the instance document. It's a default, it's invisible. And the way that these instance aspects are done, I will show you with an example, is quite sophisticated. It's taken us quite a while to develop that and bring that to CR status. But the good part is, for these CR statuses, not only do we have tools that can produce these reports, the XBRL organization has invested in having the fellow who did the inline XBRL product also build a instance product, a public open source product. It's built in XSLT, that takes an instance, applies the changes of concept name or role or namespace, and upgrades the instance document to the next year. And we've begun to show that last year on webinars. So just a quick overview. I said there were a bunch of different modules with versioning. There's a basic, concept extended, and then the two that are being developed for relationship sets and instance aspects. The key points will be that the inputs and outputs go down into this, the basic level. We have two kinds of inputs. We have things that are business related. Why are you doing this, and what are you doing it for? What's your assignment? What are you working on now? If somebody said, oops, I didn't really want you to do this, you need to undo this change, which set of things, which set of events went with which actions? And then we have the technical details, the taxonomies and the link bases, and the human, what we call semantic descriptions of what go with it. So the link base and taxonomy stuff form events that produce a versioning report, which is an XML file, and the human information behind it, that are words and expressions and sentences and languages, those go into link bases that are tied into these XML files. A very, very simple versioning report, one that went from one year to another year, 2009 to 2010, might use this base level specification. It might have some business description of the assignment. Maybe this is a technical reason I did this. I had a 2009.xsd file on one side, the other side was 2010, and I had some long role name. The role names all start with http/this, that, something else, 2009, and on the other side is 2010. And if the XML file that has that is fed into the 211 lens just produced, an instance document can have those parts of its data automatically adjusted to the new version. The concept modules allow us to basically determine which concepts are related despite the fact that the legislators changed some kind of a tax law and therefore a name changed. Maybe they're related concepts, they're kind of the same and they apply to each other, or maybe that they're really the same concept and just were technically renamed. And that's the primary thing that goes in there. So here's an example. A concept name is changed. You have the same thing as before the 2009 to 2010, and we've added on the left something saying, well, maybe it was called debt outstanding before and it's called total debt afterwards. And so the XML file would reflect that, and the XSLT that you can get that updates instance documents would make that conversion for you. Relationship sets and aspects, these are far more sophisticated because they're dealing with models, they're dealing with kind of abstract intellectual things. They've taken us 3 years to get to where we're at. We're beginning to build the software for it, and this is the stuff that will come out next. But the key thing that motivates it is we've made these transitions going from things that are named concepts to things that use dimensions. And the favorite example, we can either explain it using A, B, and C for those of you who like to think abstractly, or we could say this is property, plant, and equipment, and here's something for land, and here's something for some kind of machines on the from side. And on the to side, everything has the same name. Maybe it's X, or it's all property, plant, and equipment as a class, and the dimension breaks it down. Maybe this is a total gross, and this is machines, and this is buildings, or whatever. So to make this change requires the sophistication of modeling that we're calling instance aspects. And then the versioning report not only has to say, well, A, B, and C, maybe they went out of existence and X came into existence, these were deleted and this was added, but in addition, the A, from a conceptual modeling point of view, becomes an X with a dimension D1, or property, plant, and equipment becomes, maybe it stays that name, but it becomes additionally decorated with a dimension for some kind of machinery. And everybody just has to touch XML. This is what the snippet of the minimal portion of an event might look like for converting a fact that was called A into something called X with a dimension D and a dimension number D1. So it's the blue and green parts of the color is viewable that are changed, and the rest is the structure. There are other things we can do by having this modeling, like translating from the global ledger form, which is a very tuple, very XML style of instance document, to a financial report style of instance document, where on one side there's lots of nested XML, and on the other side there's heavy use of concepts and traditional link bases. And again, it has the same kind of structure where it refers to pieces in the instance document and how they're represented. Or it can get fairly complex if it's got to reach out and look at little hints in the XML structure of deep nested tuples, like if one's trying to figure out if something's a beginning or ending balance, because those pieces of data might be widely separated in the XML, but the idea is to be able to deal with it. And the last topic, I hope that's my last topic, is rendering. I did mention inline XBRL seems to be off to a good start, and heavy use in Europe, if we can still keep considering the British Isles as part of the continent. That's a bad joke for an American. Inline XBRL, as I said, embeds XBRL fragments into an HTML document. So in a sense, somebody already has their rendering and their specific format, and they want to secretly stick in this XBRL stuff without any way that confuses Internet Explorer or Firefox or your iPhone or anything else, so that you can see the stuff the way it's meant to be seen, but a little XML snooping can grab out the instance document stuff and the context and the dimensions and all of that. But the sophisticated side, the part that should have taken, we thought, 6 months and we're still working on, is the forward direction of rendering to produce it from the description of the taxonomies. And there we have what's called a rendering link base. It was implemented about 5 years ago by Fujitsu, just taking charge of something where other people weren't coming up to volunteer. And the 5-year-old specification, they've taken charge of carving it into modules, building pieces, adding new functions that we need to support the taxonomies we have here, and building the kind of structure to these specifications. So the authors of the documents and the preparers, where information gets put into the documents, this balance is moving, and this will allow us to have more, what we think, up-to-date ways of using the rendering. We also have some additional proposals from the projects that are currently here, so this is an area of great change. The injection model allows it to use the link base to represent the whole document and to add XML, and then the structure of the documents with these nice graphics becomes more layered. It may seem like details. It is important to make the thing more modular and extendable in the future. Let me switch forward. Another tiny little change that may seem like it's all technical babble. In the presentation link base, we've kind of put this secret little hidden trick that allows us to know whether something's a starting balance or an ending balance, or whether a particular concept is a total. And when one is doing a cash flow report, it's really important to know that, hey, this first line is the starting balance, grab it from the year before December 31st, and this last line is the ending balance, and it goes with the changes during the year, because that drives the rendering. But it's been glued into this presentation link base that has become kind of an anachronism or something that we may not need in the future. So we're moving that facility into something we can use in generic link bases and newer styles. These are the sorts of extensions that XBRL is proving very good at. Just a list of the rendering specs that have been around before are in black. The new ones are in red. And then we'll end with a little view. Everybody likes diagrams of models. This model looks pretty complex. If one looked at an instance document, there are columns that would apply to either things that deal with periods or dimensions. There are rows that would deal with things that are concepts. So in a sense, the concepts and the facts all participate in being used by the rendering process, and this middle column called rendering model is what's currently in the rendering link-based specification. But the left part, this thing we're calling the view requirements, is a part that we're heavily experimenting now with a very, actually it's simple, structural model of what's in the Excel that you're used to seeing. We've got all these different ways of marking up these columns and rows, either they're cell numbers or whatever. Tie those into driving the rendering and how that gets produced, and minimize the amount of effort that it takes to generate or compile this. So rendering is an area of, again, like versioning, it's taken us a while. and we're making some progress now. This is a Victor Moria from the Bank of Spain provided this example. It's kind of easy to see what they've done. There's some columns, there's some rows, totals, breakdown, and that gets expressed in a link base that forms the structure that's reflected in something as normal as a spreadsheet that everybody can deal with. Open for questions? What's our format? Thank you.
Sorry, do you see the output of the rendering being XBRL?
That's a good question.
Will you repeat the question to the microphone for the people attending the webinar?
Yes. This is a good question, and it was, do we see the output of rendering as being inline XBRL? That's a really good question. Inline XBRL kind of came as an expediency. People needed to render. They already have their format. They want their company's color pattern. They don't want some generic color pattern that the user applies and loses what distinguishes their company's filing from any other. Yes, of course you can make inline XBRL, but the inline XBRL will then reflect the details like font selection and color pattern and such that are in this rendering model, and we could also do text-to-speech, any other kind of output that might become important in the future. Most people think PDF files might be an output. I think it's an open type thing.
The XBRL has the unique advantage that the output that you get is still something you can analyze, interrogate by machine. So the fact that you've done the rendering, you can still use what it is that you present to users for further analysis or consumed by other applications. If you were to go through this rendering process and end up with a done PDF, you lose that ability at that point.
So repeating the comment, the neat thing about iXBRL is that you can machine process it, and the data is completely accessible, whereas if a PDF is sent out, their PDF kind of obscures the data and it's impossible or close to hard to mine. Yeah, that's an important point. I think PDF is my personal opinion is PDF is what you output when you want to make sure nobody messes with your data. Of course, that's irrelevant because it's XBRL and it's in angle brackets in a text file, and anybody can take the text file anyway.
Actually, another question might not be important, but why not add digital signatures to XBRL? Therefore, you can be sure that the XBRL is used
So the follow-on question is, as long as we're talking about people messing with data, why not add on signatures and all of the security issues? And the answer I would see is yes. It's not an area I've come up with in the working group assignment. Victor Morea is saying that they are doing that at the Bank of Spain using existing signature standards. It is just XML. There are existing signature standards, but that's kind of a weak excuse. People are actually doing that on live current projects. And I see a nod from the Bank of France person too. So that would be a better question for people on projects. Okay. Any questions from the people listening on the web? Who's listening to the questions on the web? But how will we hear them? I'm sorry, if you're on the web, I'm trying to understand how I hear the audio. Send email?
So now the next presentation is by Victor Morilla, and sorry, but we need to change the computer for logistical issues.
Okay. mic is on. Should we be going to the new light for the next one? Sorry, new light for the next presentation. Screen share. Is this working? This is a bit of a new challenge. Well, okay. Good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I never know whether to say good afternoon or good evening, as you know. In Spain, for us, the thing before lunch is the morning, and after lunch is the afternoon. We have lunch at 3 p.m. So for me, it's
So what that was, for those of you who know me, I'm a project manager at XIII, and I have to do a lot of the research here of European part of the state. And I'm also a member of some international work. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about some of the new characteristics, more important characteristics of the taxonomy that we have developed.
These are things that we have already talked about in previous workshops. And for instance, in the meeting in Vienna, I made a presentation about the architecture of the new taxonomies. And also there were some reference in the conference in Rome, but as we all know, there was these problems with the ashes of the volcano, so it wasn't possible for a lot of people to attend. In any way, I would like to stress the importance of three very specific characteristics. These things are important because if we are aware of these features, we will be able to take advantage of this in our systems. But also, the taxonomy is something that is a container of a lot of important information. So this is not something only for our system, but also for our users, for the users at the supervisor side of the channel, but also for the credit institutions. So, in order to take advantage of all of this, we have to be aware of these changes and these characteristics. I'm very sure we will be able to take a lot of advantage of them. So I'm going to start talking about this characteristic, but instead of just explaining what are the changes, what I would like to explain this from a different point of view. What I want to refer first to the limitations and the problems that we are facing currently, or at least that we could face in the future. And after that, what I'm going to show is how the new changes are going to solve these different problems or limitations.
So let's go for the first one. The first one is that, as all of you know, COREP and FINREP are currently, the current versions of COREP and FINREP are completely isolated taxonomies. There is a reason for this. When this project started, for instance, in the case of the FINREP project, there was a lot of work done already by the Bank of Belgium, so there was a lot of work that we were able to reuse. But also, for instance, FINREP makes use of the IFRS GP taxonomy. So also some of the decisions that we took in COREP were not possible to be used for FINREP. So, you know, in the end there were good reasons, but now we are in a different environment. We are talking about having this new European authority. We are talking about streamlining. We are talking basically about making things easier for credit institutions. So I think it is time for us to take things from a different point of view. So basically, what we expect to do in the new taxonomy is to have a common dictionary. So the different concepts and the different dimensions are going to be represented in a certain level, in a certain file set of schema files, obviously. But the idea is that they should be shared, both by COREP and FINREP. Where there is a common concept, there will be a unique concept. Okay? And then the difference between the two taxonomies will be the definition of the tables. And this definition of these tables basically will make reference to the different concepts in the common layer. Actually, this is an approach which looks like more like the traditional approach that we take in IT systems. There is a dictionary of data, and then there is a view, the requirements view of that data. So basically, as I said, what we are going to create is the CBS dictionary or EBA dictionary. But well, why not? A lot of the supervisors here are also central banks, and so they have to send some statistics information to the European Central Bank. So it is a more or less common interest also to require information for statistics purposes to be then sent to the European Central Bank. So well, why not create also a dictionary for the concepts in the European Central Bank? And obviously, when we face the situation, we will find that there is also a common dictionary between those concepts. Well, in the Bank of Spain, we implemented a project a few months ago in order to define a taxonomy for the European Central Bank. And the first things that the business users of the Bank of Spain did was to do a thorough review of FINREP. And what they did is identifying the common concept at each part. And they also, well, we have always been quite proactive, and we have always wanted to share this work, at least regarding to the XBRL part. What we did also is identifying clearly what was a specific request of the European Central Bank and what parts were more specific of the national requirements. So what we have done is split the taxonomy into different parts, and the European part has been published as a contribution of the Bank of Spain in the Eurofiling website. So this is also an invitation for all of you that maybe are thinking about facing such a project to have a look at it, and maybe we will be able to reuse some of our work. So, okay, let's go for the following problem that we are facing, which is the impact of new versions. In order to understand this, well, I'm trying to focus my presentation at not a very technical level, because as I said before, the idea is that we all should be aware of those changes also at business level. So I think it's important to make a good explanation. And so just I wanted to ask for apologize if I'm explaining to very basic thing, but I think it is important to try to reach the wider audience. Right? So basically, when we when we receive an instance document, the different figures in that file identify the concepts that they refer in the taxonomy using a codification. So basically what we use is a mix of concepts, dimensions, and values, and so on. But basically we could think of something like a coordinate system, right? So if we are saying that a certain amount is 100,000 euros, then we will have an identifier to refer to the concept, maybe the concept X, and maybe some additional data to identify certain attributes of that figure that we are sending. But let's have a deeper look at that information. This code is not actually a single code. It's composed of two parts, like a first name and a family name. The first name is what we call the local name of the concept, right? Or the local code in this case, because as you know, we are starting to use an abstract codification for the concepts. And the family name part is what we call a namespace. Basically, a namespace is something that looks like that, HTTP / whatever. And what the idea of namespaces is to avoid clashings of codes. So from the moment that you are using an URL that actually has been registered in this authority, I can't remember the name of the AINA authority, then there is a guarantee that there is not going to be a collision between the codification chosen by different institutions. Well, just a thing, if you have a look at an instance file, you will find that the namespace appears like that exactly. What we will see is there is a prefix and a local name. But in the end, the prefix is just a syntactical advantage. So the prefix actually has a definition also in the file that refers to the namespace. Basically, what we have to think is that when a concept is reported, we are the filer is indicating using these qualified names, this composition of a namespace and a local name to identify the concept in the taxonomy. Just a warning, which I think it is important, is a common mistake, is that applications must never make use of the prefix. The prefix is just a syntactical issue, and you should not make any assumptions on the name of the prefix. I'm sure that for most of you, this is fundamental, but I've seen too many mistakes. Actually, there are big projects out there that have such a mistake. Actually, it will be an interesting thing to try in your different applications or your different implementations to take a valid instance document, change every prefix. For instance, let's add a 0 or a 1 to every prefix, and then put the instance document again in the system. The system should be able to consume the instance document as well, but maybe you will find that there are some problems, and sometimes programmers take the shortcut and they don't do the right thing. So that would be an interesting thing for you to do in your respective system. What is the problem of the impact of new versions? Well, according to the common practice so far in XBRL, as part of the namespace, we were using a date. So actually, this is the namespace of the current FinRep. And if you have a look at the namespace used in Corep, it looks more or less like the same. So the idea was that every time there is a new version, that date was updated. Well, what is the impact on a credit institution? It means that, let's suppose that a credit institution has a database like this, right? And they develop the software to do the mapping from the database to the format that is required by the supervisor. So they will have some kind of mapping engine implemented at the system. So if there is a new taxonomy, the new taxonomy is going to make a change in the namespace. So it is going to make a change in the codification of every figure that has to be reported to the credit institution. And this means that they will have to create a new engine or a new mapping engine, or at least a new configuration of that mapping engine only for that purpose, which doesn't make sense. Okay, you could say, okay, but if the local names are the same, that shouldn't be a problem. The problem is that software, XML-based software, doesn't know that those two concepts are supposed to be different versions of the same concept. So you will need additional layers of software to solve that problem. Actually, Herm has made a reference about the versioning report establishing this link between the two versions. And he's making a reference to a new software to be developed in order to take an instance document with the old format and create an instance document with the new version. But in the end, the problem is that we have changed the way to refer to the old concept. But if the business concept hasn't changed, why do we have to change the way to identify it? So well, this looks pretty easy, and actually it also has additional impact on more parts, which are more serious. Because in the previous case, you could say, well, if XBRL International is going to release a piece of software to do that change, that's something that could be plugged somehow in the system of a credit institution, right? But now let's have a look on an analyst that takes two balance sheets from a company, and those two balance sheets have been created according to different versions of, for instance, the IFRS GP taxonomy. How is the software going to be able to compare those figures that refer to assets that are really two different concepts according to XML? How can they make that comparison? Again, they need additional information to say that something that is the same business concept, we have provided two different representations. So we are creating a problem, and then we are putting some patches to solve that problem. Another impact, and this one is very important for all of us, which is the impact on the way we perform the validation. Let's suppose that we want to create a validation like this. We want to check that the assets of the company in the current year there shouldn't be a big, a big change compared to the assets from the previous year. And if so, I would like to receive a warning. Maybe there's something wrong. Maybe that company has taken over another one. But I would like to know that something has happened. Well, using this approach, we are going to need first a formula that compares the concept of what was defined in the taxonomy of the 2012. But we are also going to need a new rule that compares the concept defined in the 2014 with the concept defined in the 2012. I'm assuming that we have two different versions, the 2012 and the 2014. So if we have a look at the year 2014, we are going to compare concepts from different versions of the taxonomy. And after that, we're going to need a third version of that validation that compares the two, the concept defined in the 2014. So obviously, we are creating a lot of problems in order to maintain all of this. And again, the cause is that we have made a change in the way to identify a concept. Just imagine that you have a shop, and every year you change the barcode of all your products. It doesn't make sense, right? Another variation of these problems with validations, as all of you know, and as Herm has presented, it is now possible using formula to compare information in different instance documents. So it is also possible to perform validations comparing information in different taxonomies, different years, and so on. Let's suppose that we have, this is an institution that has three taxonomies, the COLEP, FINREP, and a third taxonomy for statistics. And maybe, actually there is the case where you want to compare information, you want to apply a validation between the three of them. At least in the case of the Bank of Spain, I've seen a definition of validation of at least 4 different taxonomies. So in the end, the kind of validations that we are sometimes able to perform are quite complex. So in a model like this, we are going to need 8 versions of the same validation rule. So as you see, this is getting quite difficult to maintain. with formula you could do some things to overcome this situation, but in the end is you are twisting the specification and you are creating more complexity in the validations in order to patch a problem that we have created previously. So what is the reason for this situation? I'm going to tell you, I know some of you already know this story. I'm going to tell you the story about the monkeys and the banana. But I think, sorry for those of you that already know, have already heard this story from me. But I think it is quite clear in order to understand why these things have started to happen. And well, this is a story about an experiment that was conducted by very prestigious scientists in the University of I don't know, the MIT, for instance. And the experiment consists on a room. In the middle of the room there is a ladder, and hanging from the ceiling there is a banana. And what we do is we put a monkey in the room, and obviously the monkey, the first thing that is going to do is get on the ladder and pick the banana. But what our scientists do is that they discharge an electric shock on the monkey every time he tries to do that thing. So obviously the monkey is not stupid, so he won't try again to get the banana. The experiment goes on introducing a new monkey in the room. And the monkey tried to get the banana, but the interesting thing is that the electric shock is applied to the whole room. So also the previous monkey in the room is going to receive the shock, right? So, you know, the story goes on and until we start to introduce new monkeys on the room. As I said before, the monkeys are not stupid at what they're going to do when a new monkey arrives and tries to get to the ladder. They're going to beat the hell out of him in order to stop him for creating and, you know, producing such a comfortable sensation, right? So, you know, the experiment goes on, and what we do is getting out from the room some of the original monkeys, and we introduce new ones. And, you know, and we get to a situation where none of the original monkeys that received the electric shock are not anymore in the room. But in any way, every time a new monkey enters in the room, all the monkeys in the room are going to beat the newcomer. It doesn't matter why, because, you know, it's what they started to do when they got in the room. They have learned, and everybody does it, right? So, you know, in the end, what you have is a situation like this, right? Okay, this is an exaggeration, but somehow it somehow reflects what happens with what we call, what sometimes we refer as best practices. Sometimes those best practices are really but just common practices, and everybody starts to apply them because, you know, just is what other people are doing, or because it's what someone has told you is a good thing to do. And this is something that has happened a lot in XBRL, because there was a lot of hype about XBRL at the very beginning. There was a lot of importance around XBRL, but there was little experience. And actually there is a document, which is the FTA, that reflects some of the best practices of using XBRL. Well, don't get me wrong, actually the people that did that document are very good professionals, and actually I have met personally all of them. They're excellent professionals. But the thing is that that document was done when there were not a real good experience, or maybe there wasn't a clear image of what were going to be the expectations of XBRL in the coming years. But the most important fault in that document is that there are a lot of rules, but very few of those rules have information about why. So it's like the story of the monkey and the banana. You know, people started to apply a lot of rules just because they were in a document that somebody have started to use. And actually, I can tell you that even sometimes people get violent with this thing. Actually, I experienced this when we started to discuss the issue of the abstract names in some working groups. So, well, and this is actually what happened in the part of the namespaces. Someone decided that it was a good thing to put a date in the namespace, but in the end, what we have created is an important problem. But the solution is quite easy. And actually, this solution was for the first time proposed by Eric Jarry in I think it was the conference in Paris, in Vienna. And well, actually, I remember that my first impression of Eric's was what is he saying? You know, I was about to play the role of the monkey beating the newcomer. So, but in the end, we realized that, well, why not? And actually, there's a lot of benefits of applying this idea. So the idea is basically just remove the version information from the namespace. So imagine that we have the dictionary, so we will have a version of the dictionary in 2012 with a certain namespace and with the definition of a set of concepts. In the new version, let's suppose that there is a new review of the guidelines and there is a new line that is requiring a table. And because of that line, there is the need to include a new concept in the dictionary. So what we create is a new version of that file, and we add the new concept. But the namespace remains, because the idea is that as far as the assets doesn't change, then we don't have to change the way the assets are to be codified. Why do we have to create an impact on the credit institutions if the context hasn't changed? So that's basically the idea. So what are the well, this is probably a question that some people are now questioning. So, but because in some cases, and actually I guess this is the general case in Supervisors, is that you need to keep at the same time different versions. Because, for instance, you are requiring new information in the 2014, but you have to be ready to receive corrections of the findings from the past year. So in the end, you have to maintain at the same time two versions. But that's not a problem. Actually, let's explain this a little bit more. The idea is basically that one thing is the version of the set, and another different thing is the version of the content of that set. So, I mean, for instance, let's suppose that we define the set of people attending XBRL, the CBS XBRL network conferences. The set today is a certain set, but it's different than the set in the meeting in Vienna, for instance. There are new faces today. There are some people that were in Vienna that hasn't been able to attend. So the set is different. But I was in the conference in Vienna. I'm here right now. I'm Victor Morilla. I'm the same person. I'm a bit older. I have lost some hair. But I'm the same person. I'm not a new version of that Victor Morilla. So the point is that one thing is the version of the set, and another thing is the content. So how does idea is represented in our architecture? Well, basically, let's have a look at how an instance document looks like. In an instance document, there is there is a schema ref attribute that points to a file, to what we usually call the entry point of the schema. It's basically where you identify the taxonomy files where that information refers to. So if we do things the right way, that reference is an absolute URL. That URL refers to a file that is in a website. Obviously, you can have a copy of that file catching your system. And that points to a file, and that file is the one that it's what we call the DTS. Basically, is the set of files that compose the taxonomy. So basically, you have from that file reference to other files. When those references are in the same domain, you can use relative files. If we had a new version and we wanted to change the version of where that instance refers to, what we will change is that schema ref file. So we will change the point where we are, basically we will point to a different file that contains the new definition of the data. But the content of the data, which is identified using the namespace, remains the same. So obviously, we have a way to identify different versions. It is possible to have different versions of the same information at the same time, and that shouldn't be a problem. Related with all of this, I'm going to make a reference. I'm going to make a reference on an important issue that is causing some problems in some supervisors. Which, well, actually, also in the Bank of Spain, in the first project, there was a problem with this, and it is the use of URLs, and URIs in the different files and so on. Basically, the idea is that you should use absolute URLs. You know, use the ones using the HTTP and pointing to the domain and so on. From instance file to taxonomy files, and when from a taxonomy file you are referring to taxonomy files of different institutions. So for instance, in our link with the IFRS GP taxonomy, we should use always an absolute URL. And in the rest of the cases, you can use relative URLs. With this approach, if the path of the URL contains version information, we are going to be able to make the difference. So be wary of that. And also an important, this is a good practice, a real one, and it is the use of URI resolvers. Basically, an URI resolver is a piece of software that maps the information, maps an absolute URL to a local one. So if you have reference, for instance, to the IFRS GP, it's going to point to the place that you have that information, for instance, in your local file system. This is important because using this approach, you can improve different things at your production system. So, for instance, obviously in a production system, for safety reasons, it is not a good thing to do to have an output directly, a direct output to the internet. So it is not a good thing to have a production system that is getting files from the output. So it is a good thing, you know, to point to a local copy. This is also going to improve the reliability. You know, someone could hack the place. Let's say that someone gets in the IFRS website and they change the taxonomy files. I prefer to have my local copy. And obviously, it also improves the availability of the data. If your internet connection fails, or if the website of the IFRS fails, then you are going to have a problem with your production systems. So obviously, the benefits of such approach are quite clear. So again, I would like to warn about these two common mistakes. The first one is the use of relative URIs, particularly in instance files. Mind that if you do that, the first thing is that you are going to lose this capability of having possibility of versioning unless we put the version information in the file name, which is also a bit complicated in order to maintain the taxonomy. And also you are going to force, for instance, a credit institution to have a local copy of the taxonomy in the same place where they have the file, so it doesn't make sense. It's a good practice to make independent the place where you store the files and the place where you store, for instance, the instance documents. And another important issue, and this is very usual, so it is an important thing to check, is that there are some systems whose, what they do is they catch the XML files. A lot of them are based on the namespace. I have had a look at the specification of XML schema, and this is not like this. What XML schema specification says is that an application doesn't have to obey the URL information that appears in a schema. If what says is that if the application has all the information it needs recover that dictionary of concepts, it can do it. The problem is that in these cases, the application shouldn't be making such presumptions. This is, for instance, an interesting practice in order to get the schemas, the official schemas from XBRL, for instance, the XBRL instance schema and so on. That's something that obviously it's a good thing. You don't need to point exactly to the file. It's just enough to have the information of the namespace. Well, basically with this solution we are solving a lot of things. So, for instance, the impact of credit institution is solved. The credit institution is going just to need a single engine to do the mapping. Another thing is that obviously, as we are requiring different sets of data in each version, they will need an additional piece that filters part of the information. So one thing is the mapping engine, which is probably the most difficult part to implement, and another thing is the part that gets only the information that is being required in each report. In the case of an analyst, the problem is obviously solved. You are comparing apples and apples. You are not comparing apples and pineapples. In the case of validation rules, again, the problem is solved. If you define a validation rule, you are referring to a concept. The concept hasn't changed, so the validation rule is the same. You only need one validation rule. Let's get to the last problem, which is maybe one of the most important ones, which is the missing link between the tables that have been published, for instance, in the CBS guidelines, and the taxonomy dictionary. Let me show you. This is a extract of the XIII table of the COREP guidelines. If you have a look, for instance, at its cell, its XBRL representation looks like that. The primary item is credit risk, capital requirements, and then you have the dimension credit risk dimension with the value credit risk, standard approach, whatever, and the exposure class dimension is standard approach, whatever, regional, etc. So the question is, how does a preparer of an instance document knows that information? Well, actually, it is not an easy thing to do. Obviously, the taxonomy makes sense, so it is, if you have knowledge of the taxonomy, you will be able to deduce that information. But it is not straightforward, and we want to make things easier for credit institutions. So basically, we are missing that link, that so important link. Another problem is the problem for a software developer. Imagine that you ask a software company to create a tool that, given an instance document, is able to produce a graphical representation of that data. Because usually business users don't like to open the XBRL file directly. So the point is that this tool is missing some information, and that information is the format information, the way these concepts in the instance file are to be arranged for a proper presentation. And sadly, that information is not in the taxonomy file. In the case, for instance, of COREP and FINREP, there is a lot of information in the documentation, but it's English written documentation. It's not something that you can automatize using a system. So I mean, here there are some software vendors of tools like this, and all of them, they have had to spend the time understanding the taxonomy and creating that information. So, why not include that information in the taxonomy file? Another interesting point is the constraints that we have on legal references and labels. This is one of the FINREP tables, and as you can see, there is a reference in the loan that advances concept in the context of the breakdown of demand deposits and cash equivalents. So the problem is that standard references in XBRL only can be applied to a single item. And in this new set of taxonomies, we are including a lot of dimensional information. So maybe this concept is a combination of a primary item and maybe 2, 3, 4 or more dimensions. For instance, we want to indicate that this is the fair value, or it is the whatever value. So I can't remember the name. And another interesting thing that we are missing is that if you have a look at this table, this short name, lows and advances, makes sense only in the context of this table, because this is the loans and advances, considering it as a breakdown of demand deposits and cash equivalents. The kind of labels that traditional have been included in taxonomies are very large strings that reflect a name that should be, let's say, independent of the context, which is a good thing to have. But also I think it is quite important to be able to represent short labels that make sense in a certain context. That, again, is not possible because labels refer to individual items, not to composition of items. Finally, there is another important limitation when it comes to validation and also when it comes to reporting errors of the validation process. This is an example of the way in the Bank of Spain we are, our users are defining the validations. This is somehow it's a legacy of the past. This is the way the information was coded in the old system, and still we are in the process of changing it. So basically what we are doing is we take this cryptic information. These codes correspond to cell codes in the tables that the users are using to require the information. And so we have a look at them and say, okay, the concept number 3 it's this concept, and what you mean by 3 equals 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 10 is that that concept should be equal to the addition of the breakdown of that concept in that table. And if you have a look at the other validations, they refer to other breakdowns and to the same breakdown but in different columns, because this is a table that has different columns. It has in this case the country dimension. So basically our users are working like this, and then we are undoing the work of the users, because the users in the first time defined this validation rule in terms of business concepts. So they are expressing the information in that, in that tricky way, and we are trying to interpret in the IT department what they meant to do, and then we are reflecting that information in terms of concepts of the taxonomy. And I can tell you that maybe 75% of the time we spend developing formula is trying to find the relation between that codification and the codification for those concepts in the taxonomy. Because again, we don't have that information in the taxonomy. Finally, which is, well, it's quite similar, is when we report errors, our users want to report the errors in terms of cells. They want to be quite precise, and they don't want to use XBRL concepts, unless as a whole solution, maybe for more technical people or for people more aware of the internal model. It is a good thing to express an error in terms of XBRL concepts, dimensions, and so on. But as a general rule, they want to keep some kind of short codification like this. Again, this is not possible because there is not a standard to represent the information. There is not a way to represent that information in the taxonomy. So what is the solution? As we advance in Vienna, we wanted to have something like a rendering solution. At the moment, as Hem has said, the rendering working group is working on that. But what we have done is we are proposing a very simple approach to represent this information. And this approach has been proposed to be included in the new taxonomies. And in fact, we have made a pilot project, and we have included this information in the statistics project of the Bank of Spain, and actually it is something that has proved to work. So the idea is to include this rendering information. In a few words, this rendering information basically is representing a table, a resource which is a table, and that table has different axes. For instance, there are 2 axes for these 2 dimensions that appear on the top of the table, and then we have another axis for the concepts in rows and another axis for the concepts in columns. So basically, the content of each axis is a tree quite similar to the trees that we have back in simpler taxonomies with the presentation link base. The difference is that the nodes in that tree are a composition of things. So it could be just a single element, but it can also be, for instance, a primary item assets, a dimension amount, its value, another dimension category and its value, and another dimension, which is in this case consolidation scope and its values. So the solution is quite simple, but it is all we need to be able to represent that information. So how this is solved? Well, basically we are solving the problem, for instance, preparers, because the information it is in the taxonomy. Let me show you what we have made in the Bank of Spain. We are publishing a taxonomy viewer, and in that taxonomy viewer, credit institution can check what is the codification needed for each table. So just a second, let's see if the internet connection goes well. Okay. So this is the taxonomy viewer for COREP, I think. So if we have a look at this, sorry, this is Spanish, but well, basically this means something like a view of tables. This is going really slow. Okay. So for instance, this is one of the credit risk tables, and this is a representation of the different of the table itself. If the user clicks on a certain concept, then there is a screen where they can see the name of the element, both the codification, this is the old codification, and the label attached to that element, the dimension and its values, both the codification and the label. So with this information, it is quite easy to create an instance document. And actually, if you have a look, there is even an example of code that should be included in the instance document. So we are showing here how the context should be coded and how the element should be coded, which is like this. Okay. So as you can see, well, we are able to create such a tool and to obtain, and actually this tool, sorry, this tool is possible because there is rendering information on the taxonomy. Here the problem is that Here the problem is that as this is not a standard solution, there is not at the moment tools supporting this solution. But I'm pretty sure that, for instance, in this room there are some vendors that are specialized in the European market, and I'm pretty sure they will be able to include this information very soon. Another problem is the thing with the same thing but applied to visualization of instances. Here I'm going to show you another example of how we are using this information in the Bank of Spain. I'm opening a piece of software which is an instance editor we are using. Again, it's something that we have prepared. You know, we're the IT department, but we are a bank. We are not a software company, so we wouldn't like to keep up doing this kind of things. We prefer to integrate market software. We don't want to do these tools and to maintain them. So with this tool, it is possible to open or to create an instance document. And it is going to be presented in the very same way that the guidelines of the Bank of Spain have published this information. And these forms are automatically created from the taxonomy file. So we don't have to change the tool every time there is a new taxonomy or every time there is a change in a taxonomy. So basically the tool is getting the information from the taxonomy and creating automatically all these forms, all these electronic formats. Well, I think we are almost done. Just a second. Then we have also the problem with labels and references. As I said before, we have resources that represent a composition of both base items and dimension and its values. And using the generic link base, and using there are two specifications that were released with the formula specification, which are the generic labels and the generic reference. So it is possible to attach a reference to that resource. So we can have labels that are specific of the table, and we can also have a specific reference to legal documentation, as we have seen is the case in FinRep. Finally, also the validation definition process can be improved, because if we have these tools, as we have this information in the taxonomy, it is going easier to get the link between a codification that a user has said, or even a link in a graphical tool in order to define a formula, and also in order to produce a standard error message to the user when there is a problem. It is going to be able to get the information of that rendering information to perform this translation from the model to the view of the data. Well, just to finish, is that, well, we really think that with this new approach we are going to have a lot of benefits. Actually, we are already experiencing it with this pilot project, because first time it solves some limitation, but also it makes possible some features, as we have seen, that were not possible so far, or at least were not possible in a standard way. I would like again to remark that it is important to become familiar with this approach, because it is the way we are going to be able to take advantage of that with them. Also, it is important to say that we are using strictly standard XBRL, except for this rendering information, which is not a standard, but you are using the generic link base. So actually it can be consumed and can be viewed with any taxonomy editor. Another thing is that obviously the semantic associated to that rendering information for the moment is not a standard thing in tools. But also it is important to say that we are not just blindly aligned with common practices. We are just following the things that make sense, but we are trying to make things better. This is important because this means that maybe when it comes the moment to start using those taxonomies in different products, we will face maybe different problems. As I said before, this is totally XBRL standard, but maybe we are going to raise some issues on some problems, maybe in terms of, for instance, in terms of the catch problems that I mentioned before. So we have to be prepared for that, and obviously demand the corrections to the users. Obviously, we are there to attend any problem that it happens and try to see if there's a problem in the taxonomy. But the things that we are doing, we will try to prove them according to the standard. We will try to prove them with at least two or three tools. As I said before, this could be the problem, and that's it. Any questions?
I have a couple of things. Starting with the very first slides, you mentioned showing SEPs, ECP, common, talking about the statistics, FinRep and Core.
Yeah.
What about the rest? SEPs is not just FinRep and Core. ECP also is not just statistical balance sheet flows.
Well, I think that the architecture, sorry? Yes, well, the question is about, we've mentioned this idea of this common dictionary that is going to include FinRep and Core, but also it could include the information of a statistic of the European Central Bank. But there is more information. It's not just FinRep and Core, and in the case of the European Central Bank, it's not just the statistic of the balance sheets and the interest rates. Well, the architecture is able to cope with that. The architecture is meant to be used at any level and to add any dictionary. And actually it's meant to be used in a way that it doesn't have an impact on the institution, because although we have different files to store the dictionary, a specific part of the CBS, and the dictionary, a specific part of the European Central Bank, they're using the same namespace. So imagine that in the future we realize that that concept is common, or maybe it's not common between FinRep and Core, but it's common with FinRep and another type of data that could be modeled in a taxonomy, we can move it without an impact on the credit institution, because again, we are not changing the concept. So that's something that we can do, and there are no limitations in the architecture.
Is that something we are doing, however?
Sorry?
Is that something we have, however, done this? For example, we have a lot of common data.
No. In the case of the Bank of Spain, at the moment is we have some additional taxonomies, but those taxonomies are not yet using this new approach. But the idea is that, at least in the Bank of Spain, we want to apply this approach to the whole information that is required to credit institutions.
Also, we got in the dictionary, it seems like we are almost there. There's only one thing which for my what happens when you have different definitions of the same concept between versions? How do you suggest when you have
Okay. So the question is, what happens if we have different definitions for the same concept along different versions?
For example, you call it asset, what you call asset in version 1,
Yeah.
what you call asset in
So for instance, maybe we have maybe we have the assets in a version, but then the assets is reviewed according to maybe a new guideline, and so the way to calculate assets could change, right? That could be an example. Well, in that case, at least for this approach, those should be considered two different concepts. Those will be, maybe those concepts will have the same label, but the concept will be different. The reference of those concepts will be different, so the scheme, that scheme applies. So.
small addition of your namespace approach. XML, as most people know, is capital sensitive, lower and uppercase sensitive. But for file names, it doesn't apply because it's a scheme notation. And when you're using Windows, it doesn't really apply if you use capitals or not. But if you're on a Unix machine, that can cause error.
Okay, this is Roland's comment regarding the use of URIs. As he says that actually namespaces in XBRL are case sensitive, whereas the URLs depend on the file system. So if you are in a file system in NTFS, in Windows for instance, the names are not case sensitive, but you are in a Unix machine, those file systems are usually case sensitive. So you're right, but obviously the practice is that we should, whether it is published in a Windows website or in a Unix one, we should respect the case sensitivity, and then the problem should be solved.
There's a complete spec on things like percent 20 versus blank, and when they actually declare it's the same with some license. So it's a big mess.
Well, there are no more comments as we are in so please announce that we will make 10 minutes of break for coffee and for change the coffee.
Okay, for those following us in the conference, in the website, we are going to make a break of 10 minutes for a coffee, and then we will be back.
Session of today, according to the agenda, we'll start hypothetics from the IFRS Convention, speaking about the IFRS
the scope, and putting also in the XBRL taxonomy, application guidance, illustrative examples, and implementation guidance into this set of tags. Okay, now a short update on the IFRS taxonomy adoption around the world. Our taxonomy is used, for example, in a lot of different projects: Singapore, Korea, Japan, Israel, in China, in the Beijing conference. The CAS taxonomy is extending our taxonomy. Our taxonomy is used in Australia, the Netherlands, Chile, South Africa, UK, and also for the UN FinRep, also in the microfinance taxonomy. And a lot of countries are adopting IFRS, and they also are heavily thinking about adopting the IFRS taxonomy. Countries like Brazil, Canada, Denmark. So XBRL is getting really important if you talk about IFRS standards. Okay, I will continue to tell you something about the IFRS 9 financial instruments. The purpose of IFRS 9 is to replace IAS 39 in its entirety. Why? Because IAS 39 is very difficult to understand, to apply, and to interpret, and the board has amended IAS 39 and clarified some stuff and added guidance and eliminated some internal inconsistency, but there was no fundamental reconsideration of reporting of financial instruments. And because of the financial crisis, the board has decided to accelerate this development to replace IAS 39. It's done in phases, as outlined on the website of the ISB. The first phase is classification and measurement of financial assets and financial liabilities. There was last month, at the end of October, there was published a final IFRS standard on this topic. For the second phase, impairment methodology, there's currently published an exposure draft. Also for hedge accounting, there's nothing released yet, but we are expecting to have an exposure draft at the end of the year. And also for the fourth topic, assets and liabilities offsetting, we are expecting an ED, which then results in a final IFRS standard, which is expected in 2011. So what has changed? Most requirements from IAS 39 for classification and measurement of financial liabilities were carried forward, unchanged to IFRS 9. Exceptions from the fair value measurement were eliminated for deriving liabilities for investments in unquoted equity instruments, and the requirement related to fair value option for financial liabilities were changed to address their own credit risk. What does that mean for XBRL? We are not releasing an interim release for that specific topic, IFRS 9, for the 2010 taxonomy, because we are currently in the development of the 2011 taxonomy, and we will incorporate this into our 2011 taxonomy. IFRS 9 does not include explicit disclosure requirements, but it includes some consecutive changes to IAS 1, presentation of financial statements, and IFRS 7, financial instruments disclosures. So parts of the taxonomy which belong to IAS 1 and IFRS 7, we have some minor changes, but it's really minor changes. And we have to add one component to the OCI, the other comprehensive income. Another topic which is worth mentioning is the ITA, the Interoperable Taxonomy Architecture. XBRL is robust and flexible, but different architectures from different taxonomies can lead to inconsistencies between different information chains. And that could lead to problems in terms of interoperability. If you take an instance, for example, an XBRL instance belonging to one taxonomy, and you want to include this instance to an IT system which is based on a different taxonomy with a different architecture, you might end up with some problems with that. And therefore, we started this initiative, and together with the US SEC and JFSA, Japanese FSA, and we have aligned so far our taxonomy architectures, and this has been applied in the 2010 version. All these alignments are consistent with the XBRL specification 2.1, and recently the ITA group has also published a GFM, a global filing manual, just to align all our efforts, that software providers don't have to reinvent the wheel for every taxonomy project around the world. And it leads to more consistent chains, as said. Now I'm showing you a little bit of our support material. This is the XIII. You read through the standards, and under each disclosure requirement you will find a red box. And this red box is pointing to a specific concept in the taxonomy. And it also says which kind of type it is. So here's, for example, a text, a string expected, and this is the number where you can find this concept, in which role it is, and also which other IFRS standards this concept is also referring to. This is the example of XIII inventories. This is the other way around. You start at taxonomy, and you see the hierarchy, very familiar. Also again for XIII inventories. Yeah, same view, element name, what type is it, and the reference. And if you click on the reference, you then get to this underlying standard, and you can read it, and you know exactly what's going on with this concept. This is our illustrative example. It's inline XBRL. It's published on our website, again for XIII inventories, but there are also other examples. It should provide the user a general idea how to use the taxonomy, and that it can be used, and how it works, just a showcase. Okay, last but not least, our field testing initiatives. The objective is to identify a wide range of possible issues related to our taxonomy and to make a cost-benefit analysis. Participants are preparers of IFRS financial statements, including the IFRS for SMEs, and we have in our current initiative a wide range of participants from different sectors and jurisdictions. Benefit for the participants, definitely we have a very good communication channel with them. We are giving them feedback. If they're introducing XBRL in their company, they set up normally a kind of a small project team which is producing the XBRL, and we are giving them feedback, which kind of tags they should use, what they can do better, and how to use our IFRS taxonomy. We have here two different groups. One group is dealing with detailed tagging. The idea is to identify common practice concepts where the different group which is called financial institutions, and this might be interesting for all of you guys, for banks who are thinking about introducing a process to produce IFRS statements, IFRS XBRL filings. The objective is to identify common line items in their financial statements and the quantity of their occurrence, and then to make a decision if this is a relevant common practice concept. This group will focus on primary financial statements, and the notes are not that important. There we just use text blocks. The initiative will start in December and ends mid of January, and we have between 2 and 4 conference calls and 2 face-to-face meetings. So if you're a bank, you are interested in XBRL introducing IFRS in your bank, you can give me a call or contact me via email if you're interested in that kind of initiative, which leads to the end of my presentation. So thank you very much. Any questions? Yes?
You said you are working with future versions in the interim versions of the IFRS. So I assume that rules that are not yet being implemented are being made known inside the IFRS. Is there software support for this future entry date on these elements?
I can't please repeat the question.
Yeah. Thank you, Roland. So if I understand your question correct, is there software support for these kind of interim releases and the changes related to that? Especially within the future of these interim releases. The software is supporting this mechanism quite well, and as said before, we still have this annual, the annual taxonomy, which is then combining all the previous interim releases released during the year. So yes, definitely yes, these XBRL fragments can be used and then incorporated into, seen as an extension, and we fully support and maintain that. Yes?
So my question is, you have your presentation, so you have a very well and mature process of creating taxonomies. The question is, why do you create taxonomies?
The question was, why is the IFRS Foundation creating the IFRS taxonomy? And it seems that we have a very well-defined process, so what's it all about? The reason for that is that the ISB and the IFRS Foundation is the only place who can really handle the IFRS taxonomy. The IFRS standards are applied around the world in different jurisdictions, and so if you think a step further, if each jurisdiction would create their own IFRS taxonomy, right? Because if we are not doing it, who else should do it? And if you have then different IFRS taxonomy around the world, which kind of IFRS taxonomy should you use, right? What we want to achieve with that, we want to. The taxonomy is already in use. The big picture is that, for example, local regulators are extending our taxonomy if they are adopting IFRS. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. The whole benefit for us is that we know exactly what the standard is requiring. There is no, if we have a question, if something is unclear in the underlying standard, we go upstairs to the board and ask them directly, and we get a very clear answer how you read that standard. If you are jurisdiction in India, you can't obviously do that. And so you have to kind of interpret something into the standards, and this might be not always correct. And the final purpose is to get the application of the IFRS standards is then in a better quality. Does that answer your question? Not really. So what is unclear?
What do you want to achieve by publishing this taxonomy? Do you want people to use it? Do you want companies to use it to report? Do you want, why do you do all of this work? And it's obvious that you are the ones who should be doing it for everything that you have mentioned. But what's the ultimate goal of you publishing this? What's the ultimate benefit to you or to everybody else of publishing? It might be the obvious. People use it to report on their website, on their regulator. Is this the answer? Maybe it is. Maybe it's not.
Yeah, the IFRS taxonomy should be used, obviously, to report, to have a consistent set of IFRS tags around the world. And XBRL can help with that, and our taxonomy especially can help with that, to have this consistency.
This is sort of the answer I was expecting, which is my second question. If you know, as a percentage of everybody who should be using it, how many are actually using it?
That is,
vision, I assume that you want everybody to use it.
Yeah, the question is to what kind of percentage are our users using our taxonomy? This is a very difficult question because not everybody who applies the IFRS standards is also applying XBRL. If they are doing so, they can obviously create their own taxonomy, their own extension, or they can do a certain percentage reuse what we have done. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. Because the wave of IFRS is quite new and a lot of jurisdictions are currently adopting IFRS, there are certain jurisdictions which haven't applied our taxonomy yet, but are using IFRS standards in general. But it's always a decision of this local jurisdiction. We can't force them to use that. So it's not up to us to use the IFRS taxonomy. We provide the opportunity. We help these jurisdictions to use. We give them the opportunity to use the XBRL IFRS taxonomy. Other questions? If not, thank you very much.
So the next time slot is with the colleagues of XIII that are the real workers here and will present the delivery was for 2010 and early 2000.
This microphone, that is to okay. Okay. So as Ignacio introduced, the next point is to discuss what we've done so far and where we are and where we are going in the nearest future and in the longest term as well. So the 3 points briefly that I would like to cover is the approach for how the taxonomies are developed, the scope, which means what areas are we planning to cover and what are we covering now, and then the plan for the next months and years. So, the problem that we face at the beginning is that well, business users need data in order to do their work. Supervisors or auditors, they need information. And in order to have this information, they issue different regulations, because this is how they can actually require the information from the entities. And they are in different forms. The IFRSs, as Heiko was presenting, are in a big book. The FINREP, for example, was a set of tables plus the guidelines. COREP is a directive plus a set of tables. So there are different formats. And from these formats, we need to have information that, of course, can go to the database, because it's the database where we gather the information, and there are the BI tools that allow to analyze it. So with XBRL, we can have this intermediate format that will work for different databases. So whatever is the system of a bank or any other credit institution, and whatever is the system at the central bank or any other supervisor, they are able to exchange information, because the taxonomy is what defines the scope and format. The problem is that the transition from the legal things to the taxonomy is not an easy thing. So what we came up with for this project is called the data point structure or data point matrix schema. There are different names for that, but the idea is quite simple, and I will explain it in a moment. The main purpose of this thing is to allow business users to model the data from their regulations in a way that we can easily, the IT people can easily transform it to the XBRL. And this data modeling is quite complicated process. So we were trying to figure out a way how to develop some notation to make it easier for business users to understand how to build the data model that is different than just a table, which is a view, as Victor explained. And what we need is something deeper, something more general, which is the representation of information requirements in the data model, not in a view. So the data point that it's all about is we try to identify each piece of reportable information from the text, from the tables, from the paragraphs, from references, for whatever it is the initial requirements, whatever is the format that they are presented in. And then we try to describe it using two things. First thing, we have to identify what is the basic financial term that is behind this concept. So this is a very, very general thing. For example, in FINREP, it's mainly about the information that is the financial reporting. So we have assets, liabilities, income, expenses, losses, this kind of concept. In COREP, on the other hand, we have own funds, different exposures. These are the primary things. And the statistics taxonomy for the interest rates, we have different rates, not only defined effective rate or some changes rate, or the transactions in the period actual that were reported. For the statistics for balance sheet, for the ECB, we have similar things that we have in COREP, but sometimes it's extended, but sometimes it's reduced in scope and in size. So these are the basic concepts that we start with. When we look at the table, we will do an exercise in a moment to show you how it looks, the thing that we are doing, and then reviewing with the business users. Having the concept, we have to identify what is the actual characteristics in this particular table of this concept, because these basic concepts are broken down by different views. For example, assets are very often broken down by especially financial assets, by different instruments. And also, according to the IFRSs, they are broken down by portfolios. And also, they are broken down by, let's say, the maturity or any other thing that you can imagine. So these are the breakdowns that we try to identify and keep them very, very consistent so that we don't mix anything. And when the breakdown is defined, it only relates to a certain characteristic. Of course, it's not easy, and as you will see in many cases, this rule was not broken, but I would say, yes, expanded could be the right word. But in general, the idea is that these are defined very, very rigoristic, so that we know what was the purpose of having this particular breakdown and having this item in this breakdown, not the other. And these breakdowns are not only breakdowns, not always breakdowns, because sometimes when we have information about what is the actual amount of a fact, is it the notional amount, is it the carrying amount, or is it the whatever other amount, it could be outstanding amount, it's not really a breakdown, it's just a different notion of the same thing, depending on how you calculate that. Are you showing the value that was when you bought it, or the value that is right now after the depreciation and impairment, or is it the value that that is just during the period, or any other point of view of looking at a particular item, which is exactly the same notion in financial terms, just differently evaluated, for example. So this is what it is all about. The data point is just the basic concept plus the breakdowns. So if you take a look at this table, it's a real table for the statistics. What we start with is we need to figure out what is this table about. Can anyone help me? What is this table about? Yes, this is balance sheet. Actually, it's just part of the balance sheet, the assets part of the balance sheet. We don't have any liabilities here. We don't have equity. So this is about assets. So this is our basic concept in this table. Everything here is assets. And assets have a definition. The definition of an asset is that it's owned and controlled by the company and will provide some benefit in the future, and there is a whole long definition of what is an asset. And everything in this table is an asset. So we can assume that this is very basic information that the business user wants to learn from this table, from the reporting entities. And these assets also, if you take a look already at the technology perspective, in XBRL, for each financial concept, we have to provide a set of characteristics because of how the XBRL is built and what the XBRL is built for. So, of course, you have to name the item. This is what I skipped, but you have to inform the users if the information is instant or duration. So if it's stock or flow. This is balance sheet, so it's stocks. But if it was, for example, changes in assets during the period, then we'll have to define a concept that will be changes in assets because they have to be duration. The other characteristic that we can add is if it's credit debit to inform what is the required value for this particular item. If it's, for example, costs can be defined in credit and debit, and depending if it's credit or debit, you can request them as with the minus at the beginning or as a positive figure. And all the characteristics that XBRL needs. So this is actually what we need anyway, because this is how XBRL is built. And then everything else that surrounds it, not only in this particular table, but also in the documentation or also in other tables, it's the breakdowns and additional information that we have to add to inform about our requirements. So looking at the headers of rows first, what is the first kind of information breakdown that you can see here? Well, how would you break down these assets? Okay, I'll help you. So we can say that we have different categories of assets: cash, loans and credits, debt securities, equity instruments, fixed and other. So this is, let's say, the basic breakdown of assets. And of course, we can identify the pieces of information that relate to this categories of assets. But also, business users want very important information to be reported also in this table. What is important for the supervisors? It's whom the loans and credits were given. Is it the monetary financial institution, central administration, or any other sector? So then we have another breakdown. Sorry, so I'll skip to the next one, where we have information about the counterparties. So we have different sectors, and we can simply identify what is the sector. Of course, if the sector is not mentioned, sometimes it may mean that it doesn't exist because, for example, we don't have information about fixed assets. What could be maybe? But okay, there are some assets that actually don't have any information about the sectors, but some of them do. So for those that do, we simply apply the total or not applicable, and then if there is any information in particular required for this table, we identify from the breakdown what are the counterparties. what is important when constructing this breakdown is to make them complete, or if they are incomplete, to indicate that they are incomplete. In this case, this is the complete breakdown of the counterparty sector. But also you can have an alternative kind of point of view on that, because here you break down by MFIs, central administration, other general government, and non-MFIs. But in some other classification, you can break it down by monetary market funds and non-monetary market funds. And in particular, in this table, this is required because we have equity and investments in money market funds, and you can see that this is actually the same thing. It's all equity, but depending on who is the equity from, you can see that that we have to use the different classification. If we put the non-MMFs to this first classification, there will be some kind of mess because there will be double counting or double seeing the same path. So coming back, we have another breakdown here, which is also the original maturity. Of course, there are some breakdowns, as I said, that are applicable only to certain, I would say, components of other breakdowns. For example, you don't have original maturity of equity instruments because they simply don't have maturity. You buy them and you have them and you can sell them, but it's not like someone will buy them in 1 year, or loans like you give a loan for 5 years. So you have to be aware that sometimes these breakdowns, when they are defined, they can only be applied to certain items. But what we try to do is the all item is actually usually defined as here, so it's all / not applicable. And with using the default value for the dimension, or even not, we can apply the dimension for all items. And in case where it's not applicable, we understand that it's not applicable, and we'll solve it. Yes. Okay, so the question is why do we have two alternative breakdowns? Is it from the business point of view or technical point of view? Okay, the thing is that you have, okay, let Michael explain.
So it's So in fact, because this is from the point of view of the central bank, it looks at the counterparty division quite in a different way than supervisory departments of supervisory authorities. From their point of view, for example, it is not that important if this is, let's say, investment funds. They just want to know which counterparties are able to create money. So which counterparties should be analyzed to be able to check what is the money supply and so on. That is why they divide the institutions into monetary, those institutions that can generate money, for example, in this case, monetary financial institutions. And in this sense, the very specific kind of investment funds that can only invest in the short-term money market instruments are called MMFs. That is why why they have to make such separation. And if we would like to put this money market funds into the first breakdown, just a moment, into this breakdown, it would create a mess because once we want to know which are MMFs and which are not, and the other moment, in the other case, we want to have a very specific split, which had nothing to do with being or being not monetary market funds.
So, there is insert between the two monetary market funds and MFIs other. There's insert compared to the one as of a parent and child relationship between the two. But if it's only stating a list of counterpart sector members, then it should be a
okay. So this is the list, and this is already some kind of a structure, and this structure already indicates the, let's say, calculation rules as well. It says that MFIs, it's MMFs plus MFIs other than MMFs.
Calculation structure.
Yes. Well, we try to create, as I said, the breakdown so that they are complete. if we introduce non-MMFs somewhere over here, then what in the structure there is kind of different. We wouldn't know where to put it. If we put non-MMFs under MFIs, this is not true because. Okay. Well, actually, we don't create, of course, the calculation language for that because this is the just not to confuse the words. Yes, aggregation. Okay, and then of course after analyzing the headers of rows, we have to analyze headers of columns. So we have two pieces of information here. First one is about geographical areas, and this is the residence of our counterparty, and other one is the currencies, which indicates what is the actual currency of the instrument or whatever it is. Now the thing is that, of course, after we analyze all of this table, there will be a large number of breakdowns, and they will be much longer than that. I will show you later the counterparty sector breakdown for the statistics, and it's very, very, very long because of the different details of information that the supervisors want to have. So if we then pick a single cell from this table, we'll actually identify all the characteristics of the cell using the predefined breakdowns. So the first point is to define the breakdowns, and then we are able to actually check if the breakdowns cover the entire data model. So I picked this cell, it's the cell number 93, and what we can see that this cell is assets because it's in this table. The category of assets is debt securities, it's written here, so everything under this header is debt securities. Then the counterparty sector is MFIs, it's indicated here. The original maturity is between 1 and 2 years, which is also indicated. The counterparty residence is Spain, you can see that in the header of column. The currency is euro. And also we have two other pieces of information which are not directly in the table. The first piece of information is that location of activity is Spain, and this is in the header. And then we have the information about what is the amount, and the information that all information for the balance sheet in the BSI must be the outstanding amount. So this in the kind of guidelines for this information requirements not in the table itself. So there is some implicit information that we also would like to include just to make sure that the taxonomy explicitly defines its reportable concept, which is also good for supervisors because after having it defined it this way, you will receive fewer questions and queries from the filing institutions what kind of value is requested for this stuff. Yes? So there's a okay, that's true. However, we kind of okay. So the question or suggestion was to include one more thing, which is the date for the. Yes, this is of course something that is needed when information is reported. Well, we assume that as given for XBRL. So the entity, unless it's a different entity that the actual entity that is reports the value for, this is kind of we don't put it in the data model because we kind of assume that it's there. Because this location of activity Spain, it actually means that this table refers only to all the businesses that the reporting entity does in Spain. If it was the whole world, it would also mean that the businesses that this reporting entity does outside of Spain. So this is important from the point of view of what is the fact. But today we assume that it's kind of implicit. But of course there are a number of problems because, well, having this broken down like this, it doesn't yet influence the way how we need to define the taxonomy, because we have the basic concept assets, which tells us what are the all XBRL characteristics that we need, but then the rest we can define it as dimensions in XBRL, or we can actually include it already in the in identification of each cell. And this is the prior XBRL dimensions era. Actually, the tables like this, and the FINREP right now is built this way to some extent, are built so that there is a concept, actual business concept, and XBRL defined for each line as an element. Some of them are used as represented as dimensions, but because of the reuse of the IFRS 2006 taxonomy back then, there are just few of them. But the problem that we have is that if we take a look at this table, it's about financial liabilities, which are broken down by the instruments, by portfolio, and by residence in the headers of columns. We can end up with a different variations of how many primary items and how many dimensions and members we can have. So we can use just one primary item, assets, and then we'll have 3 breakdowns according to this division. Or we can use 4 primary items. Let's say the portfolio will be our primary items, and then we have just 2 breakdowns, and there are many combinations. So the important decision that we have to make at the beginning is to what level of detail do we want to go with primary items and what do we want to include as dimensions, because at the end you will see that there is a large number of dimensions, and with what Michele Romanelli noticed in the group, and I think many of you see it as well, actually for most of the concepts we have a separate context. We have a fact that has, each fact has a context, because this is it goes into so many dimensions. So there is still some reluctance of using dimensions that heavily, so we try to level it down and reduce the amount of dimensions, and also include some information already in the definition of primary items, especially for some cells that are taken out of nowhere. Like if there is a table like this, it's all right. You can see that we can easily model it with dimensions. But business users sometimes require very specific information that if you try to model it using the different dimensions, it totally destroys the whole logic that you applied for the data model. And there is a number of concepts like that in the statistics as well, and in the FINRA taxonomy. They are very important for business users, so we have to reflect them. Now the idea is that maybe for this concept we can make an exception and not to use such a complicated structure, but simply name them as they are. So there are many dilemmas here. And of course there are many breakdowns which are hidden that we have to dig from the documentation. For example, this table can be reported according to CRD or IFRS consolidation scope, so including or not the insurance sector. And well, it's not written in the header or anywhere in the Excel. You have to go to the document. So there is some work for that, but we get a lot of help from the business users, because well, it's their interest as well to have it defined as explicitly as possible. And then the rendering that Victor already mentioned, using these breakdowns, it's also quite easy to define it. So how the rendering link base is built for the Eurofiling project, and hopefully sooner or later also for the XBRL in general, is that there is a separate link base, and we have resources that identify the coordinates. And before you identify the coordinate, you have to say on which axis is it. So the z-axis identifies what is in the header of the table, so it's not something stable for the entire table. And then the variable components are defined on the x-axis and y-axis. So for example, in this, as you know, we had the categories of assets, counterparty sector, and maturity. For the headers of rows, and for the headers of columns, we had the currencies and the geographical areas, and this was kind of stable for the whole table. So it pretty needs a solution for the rendering as well, allowing to model the table and present the view from the model that is data centric, very data centric. And this is also another thing that we are aiming at, to define the definition link base in a bit different way than it's done right now. Currently, it's very often that the definition link base kind of represents what is in the particular template. So there is a separate definition link base with hypercubes for the balance sheet and separate for another table and so on. But you will see that the information in the balance sheet is actually the aggregation from all other tables. So there is no need to have the definition link base for the balance sheet, especially that it's very scattered across different ELRs because of the way the dimension specification is written and how the dimensions are modeled in XBRL. So the idea is that at the end we will try to develop a definition link base that is template independent, and we will be able to model a fewer number of hypercubes that will cover the entire data model, and then the rendering link base will actually show what is required for the particular report. So this thing we hope to be very, very stable. What may change is that, well, there is a new country that will, that's not really very often change, but let's assume new country appeared in the word, so we introduce them in the dimension, and well, and we can then later add it to the table as well, but we don't have to, because it may be a very little country that is not very important. But this will be very, very stable, and this is what changes a lot, because business users change the tables, and also they sometimes extend them in some ways. They add very specific cells. So this is what can change, but the data, the mapping to XBRL, actual mapping will be stable thing. And this is the tool that we haven't have we discussed it here? No. Will we discuss it tomorrow, Ignacio? Is there a plan to? Okay, so in general, there is a tool that helps with dealing with the taxonomy development in this form, and also creating this rendering link base. So what it does is that I will show you in the moment the Excels that it consumes as the input. These Excels define the primary items and all the breakdowns, and out of it we are able to create these domains in XBRL sense. And then later, using the domains and the nice interface in Excel, it's very easy to define the rendering link base. You simply mark the area in Excel, because, well, usually if the tabular data is in Excel or can be copied to Excel, so that's not a problem. You can mark the data, right-click and say, this is my rows, and then mark the data in the headers of columns, right? You can say, this is my columns, and then under each row and under each column, you simply identify what is hidden there. So if you go to this row, you will see that this is debt securities. So from the breakdown, which is instruments, you will select debt securities. And this tool presents the rendering link base in the tree fashion, which is also easy to allows for easy review of the taxonomy. But also, if you click on any cell, you are able to see the properties of the particular cell. So the one we marked here is the outstanding amount for the location of the activity Spain. The primary item is assets, it's loans from central government, all maturities, and so on and so on. So later the business users actually can review the taxonomy in the very user-friendly way. And also this information can be output in some format to help the reporting entities to see what is really behind each cell in the table. And of course at the end, which is the purpose of this tool, is to generate this rendering link base as well. So the scope that we have right now and for this year, so there is the BSI MIR. This is the ECB requirements for the balance sheet reporting and the interest rate reporting. They were developed basing on the ECB requirements, but in the particular placement in Spain. So that there are some extension concepts for Spain. So it's a contribution of Spain actually for this project to have the statistics taxonomy already predefined in the form of domains and breakdowns. And this is done. So there's not much really to do here because it's already on the Eurofiling website. And if you want to create a taxonomy for the statistics purposes for the ECB, then you can simply take it and see how it's built and used. And of course, there is the Excel file that we started with is also available. Now for the FinRep and CoreApp, this is what we are working on. So we want to have the same Excel files that are input for FinRep and CoreApp by the end of this year. So Michael will tell you a bit more about CoreApp because he just returned from Madrid when he was working on that. And the FinRep actually is quite finished. We just need to remodel the Excel slightly. Because FinRep was actually the first one to design in this fashion. It was last year, but the end of last year. And then it was reviewed beginning of this year, so there are some changes to implement. So some domains were changed, so breakdowns have been remodeled. However, this is not going to be a big exercise to move it to the format that is consumable by the tool. And the core, as I said, Michael will update you in a moment. So before we go to the plan, I will show you the Excels, how they look. Javi, is the entire desktop shared or? So, so this is the output format that we want to create, and this is the one that allows to generate the taxonomy. So what it has the worksheets with the breakdowns. This is actually the version that was still used for the review. So you can see that that was the initial breakdown identified. Then there are lots of remarks, and the actual breakdown at the end looks like this. So there is a list of all the items, and then the XBRL characteristics, and there is the structure, which indicates if the breakdown is complete, incomplete, or just a full list without nesting. So it can be used for different purposes. So complete can be used to create automatic validations with formulas, and incomplete as well to indicate not the equation but the bigger or smaller. Anyway, there's a lot of information already in the domain side, and there is one worksheet for the members and one worksheet for the structure, and then there is another Excel that simply identifies other necessary external information, like what is the file name that we want to create, what is the namespace of the file, and one more thing here, which may be important for the extensions, for the national extensions of statistics or FINREP. This tool also contains, or this Excel contains, and the tool uses that, but it can be implemented in any tool, a column which says common and a column which says extension. So the common column indicates those concepts that are used between COEP, FINREP, statistics, and whatever we'll have in the future, so that that central banks, the notion, the scope of the item central banks and FINREP, COEP is exactly, and FINREP and statistics is exactly the same. But if you see, for example, the some other item like in the balance sheet, you can see the main categories that, for example, deposits is not common, which means that the notion of deposits for the statistics purposes and for the FINREP purposes is different, and the definition, the reference all is very different. While, for example, a debt security is issued, which is a common item, is exactly the same. And then there are the extension column, which indicates these items that are specific for the particular country. In this case, we have 4 new categories created for Spain, but this can be created for any other country that simply takes what is the core for Europe and extends it for the country-specific items. Plus, of course, it also requires extension of the structure. So you have to incorporate the structure and say what are the breakdowns in a particular country. So having this done, we can easily fit the tool, which generates the domains. Then using this knowledge, we can create the rendering and generate the entire taxonomy. So the process gets more automatic than it was before, which is a good thing. This is how the BSI looks. This is the FINREP, so it's pretty much the same. The only difference that we have here, I have to open it differently, just a moment. To drag and drop. So the FINREP, as you can see, the version that we created was end of last year, but now we have the version that was reviewed in May by business experts of the FINREP network, and we have their comments. So what we need to do from their comments is produce the final clean version that allows the taxonomy generation. And shall I open Excel for you for the core? And now Michael will update on core fresh news.
Okay, so most of the technically important information already was told by Bartosz. Of course, we are still in the process of preparation of the core data point structure, because as you have seen, based on the statistics data models, it can be an impression that it is quite simple. When we are going into the field, especially of the FINREP, for example, it is not that simple. It is not also that simple in the case of COREP, especially when we want to find the middle ground between at least 2 or even 3 different purposes of data collection. So, in general, at the beginning, the most important information. First of all, the COREP probably will be built based on a very small number of primary items. In general, most of the data that is required according to the COREP is related or to exposures or to own funds. But it also generates some problems because the meaning of exposures for the COREP is totally different than primary items that exist at this moment in the FINREP. For example, when we are talking about exposures, we are talking about on and off balance. And it is almost not, it is not so different things from the perspective of the risk in the case of COREP, but from the perspective of the FINREP, it's totally different thing. So that is why there is a lot of work to be done to analyze the topic. But in general, it is very probable that the idea of exposures will be used, especially when we use the wide sense of this expression, and it's related not only to this traditional meaning, exposures to credit risk, but also exposures to operational risk or exposure to the market risks. Of course, there will be additional primary items needed, especially when we want to show the information related to percentage. The second general idea of the COREP will be that in every data point, we will need at least 2 different dimensions that will be added to it. First, main category. Most of instruments, but not only instruments, will be gathered in this domain, which will be probably called family of dimensions because it makes a lot more sense for business experts. And what will be needed in every case, in the case of every data point, will be the amount. When we have the information that something is an exposure, when we indicate the kind of instrument, if it is on balance, off balance, and what kind of specific financial instrument and what amount are expected, it's mostly, most of the job will be done. Then, of course, we have a lot of different dimensions that cannot or are not usually applied to different data models. For example, approaches. It will be very complicated dimension in case of COREP to analyze the approach to the calculation of the very specific risk in this case. But always we can find a middle ground in case of other dimensions, let's say counterparty, let's say currency, let's say time intervals, and so on. So we have in general 2 ideas. First, to find as much similarities between those 3 existing data requirements, COREP, FINREP, and statistics. And the second thing, to use in general some rules like those information that are required as a minimum, and then additional applicable dimensions. So this is the general idea at this moment. I hope very soon the next version of the COREP data point structure will be introduced to the public, and then everyone will be able to see how it will be operating. At this moment, I can also say that a lot of information will be hidden in portfolio, or maybe not hidden, will be shown in portfolio. Because in general, the information about the risks and the information about the banking or trading book will be there, and a lot of information will be in amount, especially most of the titles of the columns that you already are familiar with from such a templates like credit risk. It will be the kind of amount. It is because we can see the data that will be collected based on the table from the perspective of amount related to a special kind of exposure. And the last thing, at this moment, it is very probable that the CA template will stay as a flat template. It means no dimensions will be used in this case. Of course, we all we know that it is a huge area for improvement to introduce, in this case, also dimensions to indicate the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, to find some similar instruments in this case. But maybe in the later, next version of the data point structure, it will be applied. At this moment, probably not.
So Michael already started the point and of plan, and we are behind the schedule. So the plan is, as Michael said, or whatever. The plan is to have the data points by the end of the year. Then by the end of January, the FINREP taxonomy, which is going to be used by one of the supervisors, and also we can already try some proof of concepts, other solutions for formulas or error messaging or whatever else. And then through the next year, we will try to, depending on what are the updates to the information requirements to CoRep and FINREP from the FINREP and CoRep networks, we'll try to keep track on that and continue with updating the DPS and the taxonomies. The good thing is that the business users that are involved in development of the information requirements already know how the data points work, and they are very happy to, every time they introduce the table, they already are thinking about how to put that in breakdowns, etc. So it's a very nice thing. So that would be all. If there are any questions, we are happy to answer. Yes, please.
Following on the work that you are doing about data points, I haven't seen the video, but shows the one with the comments on the website. Is that from EuroID?
Yes.
I've seen the two previous versions, but I haven't known the problem.
Okay, let me check. That was for sure, that was public at some point, but probably the version that is there is already for the FINREP. It's for sure with comments. Yes. Yes.
I've seen two versions. The original one that we created.
Yes.
The one that we modified later. But is there a third version? The one that shows comments?
Yes, this is the one on the internet, I think. Isn't it? Yeah. Check.
I've seen the other two.
Okay, I will check it, and if not, then there is no problem.
Maybe the version doesn't have all the
I think it has for FINREP. It does, because we didn't remove that for FINREP. But I will check it, and then we'll check that, because
it's a great work that you guys are doing, and thanks for sharing it. At least it's very helpful.
We're happy to hear that.
The biggest problem, however, that I have faced, when they call things with the same name, but they mean a different thing, or they call them by different names, but they mean the same thing, and that's where I feel
especially for
investigators. Because I assume that you have some links with them, and they think that A and B is actually A.
Yes.
Both A. Or A and A is not really A and A. This A is a different A and that A.
Exactly. So we are trying to discover that, and not only the names, but sometimes, for example, using the breakdowns. It's the net gross breakdown. It's something which is totally well. Net and gross can mean different things depending what is the changes that we want to indicate. So
that is also why the help of the people that already that in fact created those tables are very important. And there is a lot of tables, maybe not a lot, but there are some cells and tables that is needed to investigate the content, because the content is related to other cells in those templates. For example, in the last version, in the previous version of CoRep, when we have information related to the market risk and in the foreign exchange risk, there was information about some currencies that were highly correlated, and then just next to it there was information about CIUs, and there was no information in those CIUs. We have only CIUs in those currencies that are highly correlated or not. So this is why it is really needed to analyze that with people who in fact created those templates.
More questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. sorry about that. We are in a slide of So this is my tour, Ignacio also in 10 minutes or less. This is a topic about an initiative of open source that is correlated with the initiative of open formats. The open formats are XBRL, and the open source we plan to call open filing. What is the idea? The idea is to work with open source. We already worked with open source in 2005 with proof of concept tools for the development of Corep. And for us, an open source, well, according to the scenario, is something that we may use. We may use without risk to have problems with intellectual property. Obviously, we don't plan to compete with any commercial approach because we are not software producers. But for things like proof of concept of tools that are basically for investigation, or for very specialized tools, like for instance, the specific tool that has been solved by BRIG to develop our own taxonomies, well, we prefer to work with this kind of approach. So our mission basically is the typical mission of the regulator: reduce the regulatory burden and facilitate reporting disclosure. But we plan to add the open source innovation and sustainability. And also another point, we in Europe are 27 regulators. Why the taxpayers must pay 27 times the same? Because, for instance, a taxonomy instance viewer that is something between the humans and the Corep or FINREP taxonomies may be developed once only, because it's exactly the same requirement for the 27 supervisors, or 27 supervisors putting in the website a taxonomy viewer. These kind of things may be useful to be reused among supervisors, at least is our case. Also, our idea is to provide an umbrella for this kind of exercise. How to work together and how to leverage the developments in one point and to be reused in other. And also to leverage with European initiative like the European Repository of Open Source in order to have master copies or of developments. For instance, in Spain, the government subsidizes a development in open source for business register. But the original part of the libraries that come from another project disappear in the original repository. In order to avoid this kind of problems, the idea is to maintain an open source repository for the use and protect also our usage. So XBRL is XML, and XML basically is a community of members that develop that. There are also a number of open source projects that you can see in xbrlwiki.info. And for instance, one of them is the latest, is XIII, developed by Fisher, that is here, and this is a Python library to work with XBRL. Why? So the idea is to organize an open community that open to everybody, not only for volunteers or also maybe for commercial companies that are interested in sharing knowledge or obtain knowledge of this initiative, because proof of concept tools are in our view. For instance, in Corep, we develop proof of concept tools not only for us, also for commercial companies that are interested in produce dimensional XBRL software. So the idea is to maintain a structure simple and flat, because we have not too much resources to invest neither here, not in other places. And our pillars are
maintain an open intellectual property in order to be useful. For instance, what happened the past week? I was in Peru with the banking supervisory of Peru, and the banking supervision of Peru plans to implement XBRL next year. And asked for me, okay, where can I find commercial software in Peru? I think, I don't know. In Frankfurt, you have a lot of providers. But how many providers do you have in Peru? Probably less. So they are still excited to make the possibility to reuse some specific pieces of open source, not because they have no money to pay, because they simply have no commercial offers in Linux. It's quite complex for most companies provide commercial offers in Linux. Other point is the technological roadmap. We work in a specific way with a specific challenge, and for us the open source is the open source that we need, not the open source that humanity needs, the open source that we need in our environment, and also the sustainability. The question is, we have been working for a lot of years, and we plan to maintain our work for another couple of years, and this should be sustainable. So this is the idea: facilitate ongoing development, make publicity, provide an umbrella, help to incubate implementation and business test cases. Today and tomorrow we are explaining here a number of business test cases that are really challenging. Also, ask for some kind of fundraising. For instance, we need to develop our own proof of concept for error handling, not a commercial tool, but a proof of concept in order to be sure that our approach for error handling is correct. This needs to be developed, to be fundraised, and obviously may be useful for commercial companies that may learn how to deal with this kind of error handling. Obviously, we are absolutely neutral between any kind of implementation plan for business, commercial approach, or whatever. This is not our rule. In our case, we are banking supervisors and no competitors in any way, and no special bias related with any part of the community. So we have basically, this was an idea of Diane Miller of Canada, that is also the chair of the of a working group on XBRL International for rendering. Herr Fischer, that is the chair of formulas, and myself, that I am in the coordination of Eurofiling, because we are clients, early users of rendering and formulas, and we are interested in test that, and her and Diane are also interested in test that rendering and formulas runs pretty well. Obviously, I sent some messages to some colleagues, and they are extremely excited with the idea, for instance, to Sardas from the Reserve Bank of India and Igor Sakuma for the Banking Supervisory of Peru. This approach has been approved this morning for Eurofiling, and we plan to have an internet presence as soon as possible. Questions are more than welcome. So, if there are no more questions, the next and last speaker is Ignacio Santos. Please, Ignacio.
My name is, hi everybody, my name is Ignacio Santos, and I'm from Banco of Spain, and in my free time I work in the Carlos III University of Madrid, Spain. Elena Castro, professor of this university, and I are developing this research about the XBRL data model and multinational data model. Really is a evolution, a continuation of the first presentation of Helen Fisher about the models, the data models. Is divide this presentation in introduction, XBRL data model, as fits the XBRL data model in multidimensional data model, a way of automation and conclusions. In the world of computing, XML and data warehouse have evolved a lot. XML was born from internet and now is not only filled with regard to databases today are not only storing data, they are repository of data analysis for business users. XBRL is a financial reporting language based on XLM. XBRL represents accounting information fundamentally. Therefore, one of the main targets of a report is a multinational database. This, the aim of this study is to map the XBRL data model to multinational data model, but in an automated way. But for that, we have to analyze the data model and study its semantics. We'll discuss briefly the XBRL data model. In this chart, it's a wonderful chart, no? No? Color, no? Yeah. In the left, on the left, we have a document instance. And in this document instance, excuse me, please. This slide shows the XBRL general model for a report. The report distance with the DTS structure in UML model. If we analyze a report or document instance, this report depends on a set of taxonomies or a taxonomy, but in reality it's a DTS. A DTS is a set of XBRL schemas. But with a different important question. We start with a first dictionary of first concept, first taxonomy. For example, get letter or IFRS, and we start with a parent, with XML parent. After we inherit from this to another XML schema, because the countries or different countries or the supernatural entities need adapt this taxonomy to the supranational institution or the country laws. Then we, this inheritance from this XML schema. In the same way, is this inherit? No. In the same way, the company or institution, financial institution, inherits from the another taxonomy or the another XML schema. and at the end we have we have the XBRL schema, but one document, one instance documents. But in the other hand, we have each XML schema can may or may not have up to 8 roles, 8 link base definitions, label, reference, dimension, and so on. But with special themes, definition, label, reference, they depends directly of the XBRL schema. For example, if we have a label, depend directly of one XBRL schema, once, not two, because one concept means something in Spanish and English or French. For that is a composition, is the diamond, is a composition, no aggregation, depending on existence. But however, formula rendering and calculation, we can have or theoretically we can have one XBRL schema can have 2 or 3 or more rendering link base, rendering formula or etc. and so on. In the same way, one link base formula can have 1 or 2 or 3 XBRL schema. Is the concept. In the next slide, this chart is taken from the specification dimension 1.0 of XBRL. A primary item is really a fact schema in the multidimensional data model. It's really a report, but this primary item can inherit from this report another primary item. The idea is I have one primary item, one report, another primary item inherits from that. Is in the same way. For that is the in the same way. A report can have 0 or n hypercubes, but it can have prohibited cells in the same way. For that is all or not all. Please. Can have from 0 or 0 to n dimension, and this is, can be typed or explicit. For George, I think that is very clear. Each dimension can contain members or attributes of dimension in the multidimensional data model, or subdomains with or without party members. I remember certain document of Catherine Schmel, very interesting about very pedagogical document. And the domain default really is not a dimension. From the point of view of the multidimensional data model, is not a dimension. They are the attribute of fact. Member or fact attributes may contain another attributes, and these in turn other attributes of fact. The reality is I have attribute A. The attribute can be the title, and they contain the attribute A sub 1, A sub 2, A sub 3, in the same way. This chart is very is pretty, no? Do you like this? It's a little imagination. Yes, we have in this graph show the attributes used on XBRL concept definition with UML. We have called in this moment. We are analyze this design, because I don't know it's possible that we have to extend the UML in the because it's the UML has problems, maybe. In this slide, we have a specific example of one report balance sheet that the Spanish financial institution sent to supervisor Bank of Spain. This is the report of XIII is based on FinRep taxonomy. I don't want to go into detail of the data model in this presentation, but you can see that this report inherits from FinRep taxonomy. This taxonomy is adapted to Spanish domain, inheriting FinRep. And the taxonomy report inherits Spanish FinRep taxonomy and their role in composition. In this system, and at the end, we have the XBRL schema that inherits the above concept and also inherits the dimensions. Oh, more wonderful. Okay, okay. In this slide, excuse me, please. This slide shows the data model in greater depth, the XIII. In this, excuse me, this is the same that a piece. Okay. Thank you. But we believe that its explanation is outside of time in this presentation. Okay. In this section, we'll see through the previous example, such as adjusting the XBRL data model to multidimensional data model. This slide shows, with the help of Fujitsu X1 tool, sorry, because it's a brand, that my colleague used. We can see the change in the name in the multidimensional data model for, of this report XIII. We can, on the one hand, we see the primary item, which is equivalent to fact schema. The distribution dimension is very clear. The dimension. The attributes. Remember the attributes of the dimension the dimension by default is the fact attributes of measure and the facts. Here we see this report in a summary chart. You can also observe the density of this report. Density for you is maybe done is not in the occupation of a database. Continuing with the example, but in a pure multidimensional data model, we have a model, this example, in start, model in start. The dimension, fact attributes, and so on, and you can see the methods, that is the attributes calculates. And now our proposal for summary form. What is our idea? Our idea is to get a report with its taxonomies, transform these taxonomies to multidimensional concept model through the meta models. That is the specification of XBRL 2.1 dimension, etc. formula. After, we have to transform this model, this conceptual model, to a logical model. But in this phase, we have three technologies: MOLAP, multidimensional online analytical processing, ROLAP, relational OLAP, and HOLAP, hybrid HOLAP. We transform to logical model, and at the end, where the database, the database, the physical model, that is in the three physical database. Maybe the normal is the ROLAP, relational database, is the normal. Okay. In this chart is more wonderful. This is the same, but in activity diagram of this transformation. And at the end, Ignacio is. And the conclusions. We want to build a model of abstract data and analyze it, the fundamental. Creating the necessary infrastructure of the automation process and develop it. And finally, analyze your performance in each of this stage. The performance is very, very important, because if we work a lot, think a good transformation, but at the end, we translate the data to a database. If the transformation is bad, the database broken. And it's very, very, very important that you know, I think. We have reached the end. If you have some issue or question, you have initialize our mails. Some question? No?
No questions? All the slides have been clear for all of you?
Bueno. No, excuse me. I don't know.
To express XBRL.
I don't understand. I didn't understand. Repeat, please.
Managed to use UML to express XBRL, right? That things missing in the limitation to express XBRL.
No, excuse me. Esto, o sea, no, o sea, the idea is in this, excuse me. In this cache, is not clear in this moment. We are working in this moment in this diagram. Because there are work about 2002, 2003 about this topic, but we have to work a little more. Okay. More question? And thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, with this intervention that apparently everybody is still alive. Well, we closed the workshop for today. Remember, we have